The manga begins with someone questioning us about how we would feel if the company we worked for suddenly went bankrupt. They ask if we would feel anger, despair, sadness, or futility. Then we see a person holding a cell phone with the automated voicemail asking them to leave a voice message. Our protagonist is sitting amidst the mess of an office while responding that the answer to the above question is all of the alternatives, wondering what to do. The unknown man begins questioning why someone didn't answer the phone. Frustrated, he yells that he was losing control and was desperate while we see the sun setting in the background. 6 months later, we see the same person looking for a job in a cafe using their phone, but they are rejected because they are too old to work there. Before hanging up, they simply respond that they understand while thinking that it is now even harder to find a part-time job because of their age. Frustrated, the young man reflects that months have passed and he still hasn't been able to find a job or even a part-time gig. In his mind, he comments that it is a significant problem since, this time, if he pays his phone bill, his balance will drop to zero. Moreover, he needs to pay next month's rent. But suddenly the boy notices something. Next to him, he sees an extremely bright convenience store and wonders if that place had always been there. Approaching the store, the boy notices a flyer, and upon reading it, Chan sees that the store is hiring people regardless of their age. Immediately, he enters the convenience store, heading to the counter and explaining to the attendant that he came after seeing the job announcement. Finally, our protagonist asks if they are still hiring someone. While the attendant appears somewhat surprised in his head, our protagonist wonders why the boy is acting that way until the attendant excuses herself. She quickly reveals that they are indeed hiring and, in fact, she is the store manager. The boy is impressed as he thought the girl was a student. Immediately, the manager heads to a table and asks the boy to sit there while she goes to get some drinks. A bit clumsily, the convenience store manager asks what the boy would like to drink, and he quickly replies that he would like an Americano coffee. The job interview begins, and the girl first asks for the boy's personal information. He introduces himself as Chan, explaining that he is 20 years old and lives nearby. The manager asks if Chan has ever worked in a convenience store before, and the boy promptly says yes, a few years ago. With her eyes shining with joy, the girl states that he is perfect since Chan has the right age and experience, and is exactly the person she was looking for. Additionally, the manager says that she is older than our protagonist, then asks if she can speak informally, to which the boy promptly agrees. The girl finally explains that, in any case, the convenience store's working conditions include a basic 1-year contract period. The shifts are night shifts every day, from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m., and Chan seems a bit hesitant as starting work would mean he has to sleep during the day. But before he could think more about it, the girl says that to start, he would earn a net hourly salary of 20,000. Before the girl could discuss the job further, Chan immediately accepts and says he will start that day. The manager then asks him to sign the contract. Without even thinking about it, the boy does so, solely focused on the large amount of money he would earn there. After a while, she asks if the boy has finished filling out everything, and Chan responds that he has. The friendly manager hands the boy his work uniform and says she will immediately begin training new employees with Chan. About 3 hours later, the manager is about to leave while telling Chan that sometimes their suppliers arrive early in the morning and you shouldn't forget to check on that. The boy asks if they can really arrive that early, and the girl replies that it only happens when it's really urgent and otherwise she will handle the organization. However, with expression she states that Chan must handle suspicious people properly and without any discrimination. Our protagonist simply responds that she shouldn't worry since he is used to dealing with suspicious people, and the girl replies that it's a relief. The boy approaches the door, and before leaving wishes Chan good luck, since it will be his first work shift. He also tells him to be careful. Our protagonist simply waves goodbye to the girl as he prepares for what's ahead. Relieved, he finally mutters to himself that now he'll be able to pay the rent and most importantly his bills with that amount of money. The young man also notes that not only did he find a job with a high hourly wage, but the manager is also a good person as she helped him without any hesitation. Finally, Chan starts doing some calculations and states that by working 12 hours, 7 days a week, the weekly salary would be 168 million won. As for a monthly salary, it's approximately 67 to 84 million won per month, and if he works there for just 1 year, it's equivalent to a 10-year veteran's salary. In other words, even by working just 1 month, he'll be able to pay for several months of living expenses, and that was extremely perfect. The boy hears the store's bell ring and greets whoever entered, and then the person asks where the toothbrushes are before our protagonist can respond. He notices something strange, and the unknown figure asks again where exactly the toothbrushes are, seemingly noticing Chan's odd expression. Then we see that the person is not actually human, but rather someone with the head of a dog. Annoyed, they demand Chan answer immediately. Completely furious, the dog-headed person starts venting, saying they're tired of hard work, still going through all this, and just want some toothbrushes despite everything and the strangeness of what was happening before his eyes. Chan simply points out where the toothbrushes are located. The dog-headed figure responds that Chan shouldn't have said so earlier and promptly heads in the indicated direction. As he watches the creature grab toothbrushes, our protagonist wonders if this must be some kind of special effects set up for a movie. However, he grows confused, asking himself if there's been any recent movie about dogs, and then notes that the makeup was incredibly well done. The dog finally brings the toothbrush to the counter and asks how much it costs. Still appearing extremely annoyed, our protagonist informs him that it costs 2,101, and the angry chihuahua quickly pays as he begins to leave. At the moment Chan notices the amount given, he tells his customer that he should take the change. However, irritated, the dog says Chan shouldn't bother him anymore and tells him to do whatever he wants with the change. Watching his customer leave, the store clerk wonders what the heck that was, as the individual was extremely suspicious. Still confused about what he had just witnessed, the boy questions how that makeup could look so realistic. Chan even comments that the bark of that person sounded like a real dog. Another customer enters the convenience store carrying a bag of coins and places it on the counter. A goblin-like creature asks Chan to exchange them for 10,001 bills. Our protagonist, seeing this extremely small, goblin-looking person, is left in shock. The clerk grabs his phone and starts calling someone while the goblin demands that the boy exchange the coins immediately. We then see that the person he is calling is the earlier manager, and the boy tells his boss that for some reason, a goblin came to the convenience store. Then there's a time skip and we see the goblin leaving the convenience store with his exchanged money. Our protagonist, on the other hand, is slumped over the counter, thinking about how much he just wants to go home. With a completely startled expression, he declares that he's not dreaming and that he's losing his mind. Remembering the moment he counted the coins, the young man remarks that the monster was definitely a goblin. Additionally, while he got lost in counting the many coins present, the goblin kept grumbling. He had to count 145 coins of 101 and 31 coins of 501. Taking 20 minutes while talking to his boss on the phone, the boy reports that he thinks he's gone mad because of how strange the customers look. The first customer had a chihuahua's head and seemed irate, and the next was a goblin who came to exchange 30,001 in coins. Our protagonist remarks that it all felt strange. However, his boss says that it's not strange. She explains that the teleportation area in that part of the city has a higher proportion of kobolds and goblins around. While his boss is speaking, Chan interrupts her, asking for a moment, and then questions why a convenience store would need teleportation. The girl replies that it's to reach customers, but Chan becomes even more confused, wondering how a convenience store teleports and if the store manager is a magician. Calmly, as if it were any other day, the girl responds that she is indeed a mage. She then explains that her convenience store is enchanted with teleportation magic, which she cast herself. Finally, she reveals that this is why her convenience store constantly relocates to various places. The girl also admits that she should have mentioned this to Chan earlier, but says she forgot. The manager adds that she will explain the details to him another day. Finally, she asks Chan why he's acting strangely, as if he seems like someone from a completely different world. Our protagonist then, after opening the convenience store door, is met with numerous species and races entirely different from anything he's seen before. The boy sees humanoid animals, monsters, goblins, and similar beings and becomes utterly bewildered. His boss soon remarks that she was only joking earlier and that Chan shouldn't actually be from another world. But if he were, it would be hilarious. Completely shocked by everything that's happening, the boy takes a deep breath and speaks to his boss. He tells her that when she joked earlier about him being from a different world, it was actually true. He's someone who lives in a different world. The boy explains that where he comes from, magic doesn't exist, let alone different species, leaving his boss completely stunned, confused. She wonders what she should do in this situation, while our protagonist appears puzzled by something. Chan, meanwhile, looks outside the convenience store, and through the glass sees a person with a feminine appearance and long horns. That frightening-looking girl begins to open the door, making the boy panic. Afraid of the situation, the boy starts backing away and crouches near a shelf. Concerned, his boss asks what's happening and if Chan is okay. Confused, Chan asks if his boss is also from a different species, while the girl who earlier had scared Chan is now calmly shopping. A boss asks if Chan can hear her. He replies that he can and asks the girl to continue speaking. Then she mentions that it seems Chan has somehow crossed into their world. However, she admits she has no idea why this happened. We then see that the boy is hiding behind the counter, and at this moment, his boss comments that she's never experienced anything like this, making the boy even more worried. Our protagonist finally musters his courage and says they first need to deal with the current customer. Asking how he should handle these different species, the girl prepares to respond, but at that moment, Chan sees the customer who was in the store for some reason, lying on the ground and laughing hysterically. He quickly informs his boss about what's happening. Hearing this, the girl seems a bit concerned and asks him to describe the woman. The boy explains that the customer has horns on her head and small bat wings on her back. Immediately, his boss recognizes that it's a succubus and reassures him that they aren't very dangerous, so Chan shouldn't worry. After this revelation, the girl instructs Chan to look for a curse detector under the counter. She also mentions that the curse detector is quite flashy because it's very colorful, and Chan begins searching for it. After searching for a while, the boy wonders if a curse detector is really colorful, and what colors it might have. The boy then finds an extremely bright and pink magic wand. Chan asks his boss if that toy wand is actually a curse detector, and the girl confirms that it is. The manager explains that if someone is affected by a curse, they usually become depressed and tend to take the test. That's why she chose a colorful toy to lighten the mood of such customers. The girl also explains that to use it, Chan needs to place the toy against the exposed skin of the customer, press the button, and wait. But before the boy can process this, a succubus arrives at the counter, still acting in a frightening manner. Looking at this creature, who seems to just want to purchase an item, the boy is utterly terrified. Mentally, the boy complains to his boss, recalling that she said succubi aren't dangerous. However, accidentally, he presses the button on the wand for some reason. The wand quickly flies out of Chan's hand and hits the poor succubus on the head. Unable to resist the attack, the girl begins to collapse to the ground while Chan remains motionless. The succubus is completely defeated, and after falling, all the items she was holding scatter across the floor. Our protagonist, still holding the item, is completely confused, and the device starts emitting a pink glow. Chan promptly gets up to analyze what happened to his customer. He approaches the girl and observes her completely unconscious, lying on the ground. Terrified and panicked, he informs his boss that he accidentally killed a customer. Our protagonist explains what happened to his boss, and upon realizing that the customer was hit by the curse detector, she is genuinely surprised. However, the girl calmly tells Chan not to worry, as that's exactly how the detector is supposed to work. Then she asks what the test results were. The boy replies that the wand was glowing violet, and she suggests Chan discreetly take a curse remedy medicine from the medicine aisle. He grabs one of the medicines, states its name, and then asks if it's the one his boss was referring to. The girl confirms it is and instructs Chan to give the customer just 2 pills. Confused, the boy asks if the unconscious girl is suffering from homesickness. His boss explains that it's slightly different, but that the medicine should still have an immediate effect on the succubus. Our protagonist notices that for some reason, the succubus is waking up and informs his boss. Then, remembering the earlier moment when the girl acted like a monster, he tries to speak to her. Chan decides that he should first evaluate the situation from a safe distance while trying to. He asks if the girl is feeling better now and then politely requests that she take the medicine. But when he turns around, the girl who previously had a terrifying expression now looks much friendlier in his mind. Chan comments that upon closer inspection, the girl seems to be much better. Our protagonist asks if his customer is okay, but the girl covers her mouth as if about to vomit. He tells her to wait a moment, but it's too late. The succubus throws up everything she had in her mouth. Afterward, she seems incredibly relieved and much happier compared to before having done that. The succubus remarks that she feels completely renewed. Furious that the mess he now has to clean up, the clerk states that if she's done, she should leave. However, shamelessly, she just looks at our protagonist again with an extreme acute expression. The girl points at Chan and comments that it's cold. The boy, on the other hand, wears an extremely confused and irritated expression. The girl seems to become slightly dizzy and suddenly collapses to the ground. Looking closely, Chan realizes that, for some reason, the girl simply fell asleep. Another customer, with white hair and pale skin, enters the store, calling for the boss. With an extremely puzzled expression, he questions what's going on as he sees Chan with a very annoyed face next to an unconscious person irritated. Our protagonist greets the boy and asks if he's looking for something somewhat confused. The young man asks if Chan has a 17-degree blood bag. Chan speaks to his boss on the phone while the pale customer searches for what he needs. The manager asks if the succubus customer has taken the medicine, yet the boy replies that she has, but he plans to give her the medicine as soon as the pale customer leaves. The major assures him that it's fine and tells him they only stock blood bags under 15 degrees, so he should suggest the customer visit another store. The boss also instructs Chan to verify the boy's identity before selling him the blood bag, then asks if the customer is a vampire. Chan responds that he probably is, and the boss explains that vampires live long lives and appear youthful, which is why they periodically update their identification. Sometimes people present expired IDs marked with an X, and those individuals are usually adults. In other words, since the convenience store has a magical alarm, Chan should feel comfortable inspecting the customer. Upon hearing this, the vampire says it's a minor concern, and Chan replies that he understands. The creature approaches Chan, and the boy tells his customer that he only has blood bags under 15 degrees, so he'll probably need to visit another store. The boy then hands Chan a drink and remarks that he will buy it, prompting the clerk to inform him of the price. The young boy asks for a bag and shortly after, also requests a pack of cigarettes. Confused, Chan asks what kind of cigarettes the boy wants, and he seems a little unsure. The boy soon points to one that catches his interest, still looking somewhat confused. Our protagonist begins scanning through the options to determine which one his customer wants. As his hand hovers over a specific pack, the vampire becomes very interested and insists that it's the one beneath Chan's hand. The boy continues his requests, but the clerk turns around and starts to feel suspicious of the young boy. Trying to play it cool, the boy scratches his head as if nothing happened. Noticing the boy's strange behavior, Chan suspects that he might be underage. The clerk asks the vampire if he can show his ID. The young boy begins stuttering, claiming that he's renewing his ID and only has an expired one. Chan responds that he can show any form of ID, but he needs to verify that the boy is of legal age. The vampire asks if Chan can't just sell him the cigarettes, but the clerk replies that it's a procedure, which irritates the creature, who slams an ID card onto the counter. He orders Chan to proceed, adding that his friends are waiting outside, so the clerk should hurry up. Analyzing the ID, Chan grows frustrated with the customer's stubbornness and remarks that the IDs in his world, and this one, seem quite similar. He examines the card and notes that it does indeed have an expired seal. At first glance, the ID seems legitimate, but Chan suspects it might be due to his mood. However, upon closer inspection, he notices a rainbow behind the boy's photo, as if a small piece of paper is sticking out. Chan begins peeling the boy's photo off the ID like a sticker. As he removes the sticker, a glow emits from the card, spreading throughout the store. Our protagonist is completely confused, wondering what is happening. For some reason, the light starts chasing the vampire. The young vampire runs from the beam of light, questioning why it's pursuing him. The boy yells, asking what Chan did, but the clerk merely apologizes before pointing out that the ID belongs to the customer, so he should know what it is. Desperate, the vampire instructs Chan to put the sticker back, but the boy remains puzzled. Meanwhile, the succubus appears to be peacefully resting. Finally, the glow subsides a bit, and when Chan looks at what was behind the sticker, he discovers something unbelievable. Our protagonist sees an adult completely different from the boy standing in front of him and becomes furious. Chan informs his customer that the sticker has disappeared, and afterward, the document has changed. The clerk remarks that he doesn't know what his customer did, but that ID is undoubtedly fake, which the young vampire denies. At that moment, Chan reveals that he's on the phone with his boss and asks if she heard everything. The girl responds that she did and says she'll call the police. The vampire, panicked, grabs his fake ID and quickly runs away to avoid getting caught. The boss then admits that she didn't understand anything and asks Chan to explain the situation, to which he readily agrees. After some time, our protagonist concludes by saying he was suspicious, and it turned out as he thought the boy was underage. His boss praises him, saying that's incredible. However, the girl questions how Chan knew since she didn't hear the store's alarm go off. Chan responds that the customer handed him a fake ID with a sticker on it. He explains that the boy forged the ID by placing his own photo over it. Moreover, when he removed the sticker, some kind of magic activated on the identification. Confused, The boss asks if the boy recognized that by sight alone, and Chan promptly confirms, saying he's seen that kind of thing before. The manager comments that it's quite difficult since IDs in their world have strict security, making forgery and tampering extremely hard. In other words, forgers in that world are extremely skilled, and these individuals are so adept at magical illusions that it's challenging to recognize such things by sight alone. Han asks if it's really that difficult, and his boss replies that although the store's alarm magic tends to be somewhat unreliable, if it didn't go off, there's usually no issue. Once again, she questions how on earth the boy recognized the forgery, and Chan immediately realizes that everything that happened was a magical illusion. Our protagonist wonders if the vampire was truly a formidable figure, but quickly dismisses the thought ironically. Even the forger seemed a bit confused about everything that was happening. Suddenly, his boss asks Chan if they should terminate his part-time contract, and the boy hearing this becomes extremely confused. Completely panicked, Chan asks if he did something wrong. However, the boss replies that on the contrary, he's doing very well, but since he's someone from another world who accidentally ended up there, she's worried it might be scary or difficult for him. To her surprise, Chan responds naturally that he's fine. He says it's not particularly scary or difficult, and that he genuinely wants to continue working in his mind. Chan thinks that it seems his boss is genuinely concerned about him. After all, it's an unusual situation, but he has to keep working there or else, starting next month, he'll have to live as a homeless person. The boy pleads with the manager to let him continue working, and she promptly agrees but warns that she won't deal with complaints later. Chan agrees and immediately asks if it's okay to keep talking to her on the phone today, and she consents. She then asks if the boy has given the succubus customer the medicine, and he finally remembers. The boy comments that he'll give her the medicine right away. Our protagonist pours the powder into the mouth while she's in a deep sleep, completely unbothered. He observes the girl sleeping peacefully, seemingly unaffected by anything. Chan tells his boss that he gave the medicine to the customer, but there hasn't been any reaction. His boss, on the other hand, reassures him that since he administered the medicine, the succubus will slowly regain her senses. However, she warns the boy to be careful, as the girl might still feel nauseous. The boss asks if Chan thinks the customer feels confused or dizzy, but he replies that she doesn't. She suggests that Chan use the to check for curses on the succubus again. Holding the wand, Chan comments that it's not turning on and only makes a sound. The manager asks if the customer's body appears to be in worse condition, but Chan promptly says no. The mage comments that the girl's body seems to be in a very peculiar and special state. Before Chan can ask what kind of state that is, he hears a loud sound coming from outside the store. Trying to steady himself and leaning on a shelf, the boy wonders what kind of noise and vibration it is. He starts running outside the store, wondering if it's raining meteors. When he gets there, the boy sees something he truly didn't expect. He finds a pile of boxes and goods right in front of him. A female voice announces that the delivery has arrived, and looking to the sky, the boy sees a girl riding a waned horse. The girl asks if he is the new part-time worker her sister mentioned, and immediately says it's a pleasure to meet him. Seeing the person in front of him, our protagonist greets her and asks her to wait a moment while he speaks on the phone. He tells his boss that someone on a Pegasus has arrived with cargo, and asks if this is the logistics she mentioned earlier. The boss promptly replies that she said Yona would handle the delivery that day, and hearing that name, the boy becomes confused. However, the girl introduces herself as Su Yona and immediately asks the boy to step away from the store entrance, obviously scared. Our protagonist agrees and quickly runs back into the convenience store. Yona then asks if the boy could check the received items and sign for them now, and the boy reluctantly agrees. He quickly examines the paper handed to him while glancing at the girl unloading the deliveries. While talking to his boss, the boy reports that doesn't recognize the written language of that world and asks how he should confirm the orders. The boss replies that she'll talk to her sister about it, but for now he should just handle the signature. Then Chan asks what items have arrived. The girl responds that the delivery included snacks, drinks, and even dragon scales. She mentions she thought they wouldn't be able to obtain them, but Yona managed to find them. Casually, she adds that dwarves and academies purchase such items often. However, she suddenly realizes and asks Chan if there are no dragons in his world. Chan retorts, stating that something like that couldn't exist in his world, as there are no magical or mystical species there. His boss replies that Chan's world must be even more outdated than their rural regions. Chan finally asks her not to compare other people's worlds. And at that moment he notices that the succubus inside the store is waking up. The clerk tells the customer that she's finally opened her eyes, and that's a good thing. He then explains to the succubus that he will calculate her bill now that she's awake. However, the succubus suddenly asks Chan what love is, leaving him completely confused by the question. Gallantly, Chan helps the customer walk to a taxi. He places the girl inside while she appears to be dozing off hugging something. Our protagonist informs his customer that here is the receipt for the medicine she took earlier in her card, then hands over her items. However, the girl seems a little confused by the situation, and Chan asks her to hold everything properly. Otherwise, she might lose it. The taxi driver, on the other hand, asks Chan if the customer had been drinking alcohol. Our protagonist explains that he thinks the girl was under some kind of curse, but now that she has taken the medicine, she should feel better. However, he adds, she still seems unsettled, so the driver should be cautious. The customer, meanwhile, keeps asking what love is. She also remarks that even when you think you understand it, it remains elusive and wonders what it could be. Chan responds that love is something you want but can't have. Hearing this, the girl is shocked. She leans closer to him and demands to know what on earth he means by that, leaving Chan feeling a bit nervous. Afterward, he simply asks the succubus to forget what he said, and the taxi drives off, leaving him behind. Chan feels relieved since the way he met the succubus was unpleasant, and they probably won't see each other again. Stretching, the boy celebrates, thinking that everything will finally be quiet. Suddenly, someone exits the convenience store, bumping against the glass. Yona, for some reason, seems bothered by something, and Chan wonders why she's acting that way. He quickly approaches the girl and asks if something is wrong. The girl asks Chan to remove the dragon scale shipment, and when he asks why, Yona explains that there's something wrong with those items. From the counter, our protagonist observes Yona on the phone with his boss, and confused, he comments to himself that it looks like they've been talking for a while. Noticing this, the boy concludes that the problem must be serious. He also comments that it reminds him of when he worked part-time as a waiter, and would see his boss and the delivery person arguing over spoiled ingredients. Chan decides that even if there's a defective product, a part-timer can't do much. He resolves to simply observe while his superiors handle the situation and focus on his own tasks without worry. Yona approaches our protagonist and asks if his name is really Lee Chan, to which he confirms. She then mentions that her sister wants to speak with him, and when she turns her phone around, Chan sees his boss image. The store manager asks Lee to inspect the dragon scales with Yona, and though reluctant, the boy agrees. Next, we see our protagonist entering a strange door behind the convenience store. He and Yona appear to be walking through what looks like a dungeon, looking at the walls and observing the area. The boy questions whether this is really part of a convenience store. Walking through the corridors of the place, Chan wonders why the convenience store's warehouse resembles a dungeon. Yona asks Chan if it's his first time seeing the storage area, and Lee promptly replies that it is. Chuckling softly, the blue-haired girl comments that hell, get used to it quickly, adding that she was the same way in the beginning. SEO, teasing the manager, remarks that she's already told her sister her tastes are peculiar, but the manager responds that she decorated the convenience store according to her preferences. The girl remarks that there should be some limits since the interior is extremely strange, but the only reaction the manager gives is a pouty face. Finally, they arrive at a specific room filled with shelves and boxes. The blue-haired girl comments that it's dirty inside, so Lee should wait for a moment, and the boy agrees. Talking with his boss on the phone, he tells her that since she asked him to check things out, he went to the storage room. However, he asks if there's anything he can do, and the girl replies that he should simply follow her instructions since she has a plan in mind. Looking around, Lee notices a strange purple slime oozing out of an odd object that resembles a scale. Staring at the substance, the boy becomes completely confused, wondering what it is. Totally baffled, Lee asks what the strange goo is, and SEO responds that it's pus. She explains that this pus is a cluster of contaminated magical energy, and if the purification process for dragon scales isn't done correctly, this is what happens. Chan then asks if the large object that looks like a turboshell is a dragon scale, and the girl confirms it. She mentions hearing that scales discarded by dragons moving to rural areas are often neglected, so she hurriedly brought those scales here. However, because she was in a rush and couldn't trust the work of a proper company, this is the result. But SEO says it's not too serious, and if they purify the scales immediately and scrape away the pus, they can still use them. The problem is that it's already midnight and the company is closed. While listening, the boss finally speaks and says that's why she wants her employees' help. Leaving Chan confused brazenly, the girl asks if Chan would like to touch the pus. Hearing this, the boy is utterly incredulous at the outrageous question. Yona crouches down, collects some of the slime, and asks Chan to touch it. She tells him that it's harmless, and that he just needs to touch it. The protagonist's boss says she trusts him for this task, but he remains hesitant, wondering what would happen if he touched it. Immediately, Yona adds that she'll pay him 100,000 won if he does it, and at that moment he agrees. The boy reaches out to the pus, while Yona thinks to herself how simple this boy really is. As he attempts to touch the slime, for some reason, it recoils and repels his hand. Observing the bizarre material, the boy wonders aloud if this thing is alive. The manager replies that it's impossible since it's just a cluster of magical energy. Yona also confirms that it's probably avoiding Chan, but the manager instructs him to ignore it and grab the slime anyway, which he does, clutching the amoeba-like substance. A magical reaction begins, and a light starts emanating from the strange object. Both Chan and Yona stare at the glowing object in awe. Suddenly, the goo, which was previously purple and ugly, changes color, becoming a stunning petrified blue. Siyu is utterly shocked, exclaiming that it happened just as her sister had predicted. The girl yells for her sister to see it, marveling that it turned out exactly as foretold. However, the manager comments that it's too early to celebrate and asks Chan to place the wand on the stone. The boy does so, but when he touches the wand to the magical stone, absolutely nothing happens. Our protagonist informs his manager of this, and she explains that it's because there's no contaminated magical energy for the wand to detect. She further states that the reaction from the slime is the type of result you get when the purification process is done correctly. Confirming her prediction, the manager then reveals that, based on what she observes, Lee might have an anti-magical constitution, leaving the boy even more confused. Yona interjects, explaining that, in simple terms, it means having a body immune to magic. Because of this, the boy's manager says she needs to discuss something with him. She asks if Chan remembers when they tested his body earlier using the wand. The boy promptly replies that he does, and that it made a loud noise. The manager retorts that such a reaction only occurs in two cases. The first possibility is when there is absolutely no magical power, which in their world would be incredibly dangerous. However, since Lee is from another world, it's irrelevant. The remaining possibility is that the testers don't work due to the magical resistance Lee possesses. Hearing this, the boy asks what that even means, and the girl explains that she wants to test her theory, which is why she asks Chan to accompany Yona. She also mentions that she will share more details with him once her sister leaves, and he simply responds that he understands in his head. The boy wonders what the heck his boss is talking about, since on his first day, he discovered he had magical resistance that reflects rainbows turning away. He muses that it's not like he's the protagonist of a drama who just discovered a secret about his birth. Suddenly, for some reason, Yona slams her hands against the wall, pinning Chan in place. After doing this, Yona says she has a favor to ask and inquires if he would hear her out. Cornered, he responds hesitantly, asking what she wants. Lumpily, the girl asks Chan to help purify the dragon's scales, framing it as a personal favor. Chan seems uneasy about the request, questioning if she's seriously asking him to do this. Yan responds that she believes he can do it, and the manager gets Chan's attention. Looking at the phone screen, he sees an unbelievable sight. The boy sees his boss with the expression of a starving puppy, begging him to help her sister. In his mind, Chan wonders if his boss and her sister are really serious about having him handle the purification. Glancing at Yona, he sees her eyes shining with hope, and he begins to feel tempted. He covers his eyes, stating that the brilliance of the two sisters is too much and their gazes are too intense. Finally, Lee gives in and says he'll do it, but wants to know how. Hearing this, Yona and her sister are genuinely grateful. The blue-haired girl explains that the method is simple. He just needs to place his arm into the hole in the scale. Seeing this, our protagonist immediately regrets his decision. He says he doesn't want to do it, and Yona asks why he changed his mind so suddenly. Lee responds that it seems far too dangerous to stick his arm in there, but his boss assures him that his special body ensures nothing will go wrong and that he should just do it. She continues pleading, but the boy insists he won't do it because he doesn't have the courage. However, looking at the phone screen, he sees his manager promising a bonus if it works, Flashing some bills for emphasis. Now confident, the boy promptly agrees, stating he'll do it and that if it hurts, he's gonna scream. Approaching the dragon scale, the boy remarks that it looks even grosser up close in his mind. However, he convinces himself that he really needs the money and will endure it. Shannon closes his eyes to focus, stating that he's doing this only for the bonus, and begins plunging his arm into the scale. His arm is practically sucked into the scale, triggering a reaction. He finally goes all the way, his entire arm engulfed by the strange goo. Yona, seeing this, approaches and asks if he's really okay. The boy promptly responds that he's fine, but there's some kind of force pulling him deeper into the hole. Sayo hears this and asks him to hold on because she'll pull him out immediately. However, the scale continues to pull the boy in. Watching this, Chan realizes that the puss is being drawn into the hole while the glowing light from before spreads throughout the scale. Finally, the boy is freed from the hole, getting thrown backward along with Sayo as the radiant energy begins repairing the scale. The scale regenerates completely and all the puss is reabsorbed into it, sealing the hole with a new shell. As he gets up, our protagonist remarks that the whole experience was incredibly chaotic. In his head, he mutters that this was a disaster, especially for his first day on the job, until someone calls out to him. Yona, who had been hit when Chan removed his arm from the hole, begins grumbling. Seeing this, the boy apologizes and asks if she's okay. She responds that she's fine, but asks if our protagonist is hurt. Lee replies that he's okay, and thanks to her, he didn't hit his head on the ground. Yona, standing up, then asks if he could check the dragon scale, and he promptly agrees. Our protagonist picks up the toy wand and approaches the dragon scale, touching it shortly after. The boy reports that there's no reaction, just like with the rock earlier, and upon hearing this, Yona declares it a success. The girl begins profusely thanking Lee for his help, saying that thanks to them, they avoided the loss of tens of millions of won. Later, we see Yona on her Pegasus, reporting that Lee worked hard and that she had already contacted her sister to inform her that the task was successful. Our protagonist, on the other hand, asks if she doesn't come there every day. Yona replies that dealing with deliveries is quite challenging and takes a lot of time. Lee wishes Yona a safe journey, but the girl yells at him to stop being so formal. SEO adds that her sister, the manager, mentioned that Lee is a year older than her. She encourages him to call her Nuna, and the boy reluctantly says he'll try. Shortly after, he calls her Nuna, and she adjusts her glasses before taking off on her Pegasus. Flying away at sunrise, she tells him she'll see him again another time afterwards. She soars into the sky amidst the rising sun, while Yona watches her departure. Turning to the side, the boy finally realizes that it's morning. Back at the convenience store after a few hours, we see someone with animal-like hands placing items on the counter. A kobold, half human and half dog, asks our protagonist to hurry as she needs to catch a bus soon. Lee promptly calculates the total price of the purchases, and the kobold places a bill on the counter, telling him to keep the change. Chan watches the half-animal customer leave. Looking quite puzzled, he turns around and calls for the next customer, and we see a queue filled with various species of people. Time passes, and Yona finally finishes serving all the customers inside the store. After some time, we see the boy complaining about being utterly exhausted as it's been a while since he stayed up all night. At that moment, he responds to a message from his boss, who asks if Lee isn't feeling sleepy. Our protagonist replies that he's fine. The girl commends Lee for working so hard on the purification task, and assures him that she'll give him the money as soon as she gets to work. At that moment, the boy hears the store bell ring, but when he looks toward the door, there's no one there. Kim wonders to himself if the customer simply entered and left right away. Chan replies to his boss that he doesn't usually sleep much at night, and the girl comments that it's not healthy and says she'll give him a sleeping potion, which surprises Chan. In his head, the boy thinks he's never received a magical potion in his life, and at that moment someone calls out to Lee. However, when our protagonist looks to the side, he sees absolutely nothing, only hearing a faint voice calling for him. Standing up, the boy sees something that leaves him astonished. He spots a little girl with 2 white horns and an angelic appearance asking if he has colored paper. The girl, besides asking about colored paper, also asks if he has scissors. Our protagonist replies that both items are on a high shelf and asks if she would like him to get them for her. The little girl declines, saying it's fine and thanking him for his help. She heads to the spot Chan mentioned while he watches her. Observing the child trying to reach the paper, Lee thinks she seems quite mature but notes that her skin is very pale in his head. He wonders if the girl might be some kind of reptile. The little girl, meanwhile, continues trying to grab the paper, but is too short to reach it. She starts to tear up, and at that moment, Chan steps out from behind the counter to help her. He quickly grabs the materials she requested and kneels to hand them to her. With the paper in her hands, he tells her that here are the items she asked for. With tears in her eyes, the little girl simply thanks him for his help, noticing that the girl resembles a dragon. Our protagonist wonders if she might unleash a fire breath attack, thinking it would be troublesome if she destroyed the store. However, the little girl, with a sad expression, looks at the price of the items and says she can't afford to buy them. Chan asks why, and the girl responds that she only has 5,001 and doesn't want 101. Feeling sorry for the girl, Lee replies that the total cost is 5,101, but he can cover the difference for her. However, the reptilian girl refuses, saying her mother told her never to accept money from others. Curious, our protagonist asks why she needs the colored paper and scissors. Shyly, the little girl explains that Mother's Day is approaching, and she really wants to give her mom a gift. She just learned about Mother's Day in kindergarten and says her mom always buys her presents for Children's Day, but she has never given her mom a gift on Mother's Day, so this time she wants to do something special. Hearing this, Chan feels moved. Our protagonist suggests that she could make origami without scissors, but the girl extends her hands and says she can't. Chan, puzzled, asks what's wrong with her hands. That's when the girl reveals claws. Leaving him concerned, she adds that when she handles paper, tears because of her claws. Chan realizes that she could easily rip through anything with those sharp talons. He acknowledges that origami would be difficult with such hands and thinks that even if he offers to pay for her, the girl would never accept. Moreover, it seems like a surprise gift, so Chan makes a decision and asks if he should lend the store's scissors to her. He sketches some flowers on a piece of paper and hands it to the girl, asking her to try cutting the colored paper along the outlines. Seeing this, the half-dragon girl beams with happiness and thanks him profusely. In his head, Chan muses that this situation has turned into a bigger ordeal than expected, as his shift has already ended and he's practically helping her do everything. He also thinks there's no need for a little kid to go to such lengths. Additionally, he notes that the manager will arrive soon and wonders what he'll say to her. At that moment, the half-dragon girl asks for a moment. She goes to a food shelf and comes back with a chocolate bar, asking how much it costs. Chan tells her the price and asks if she's planning to buy it. She promptly replies yes, and they head to the counter. Chan scans the product and the little girl pays the 2,001. Afterward, he tells her she can eat it whenever she likes but notices that she's doing something specific. The girl breaks the chocolate bar in half and hands a piece to Lee. She insists that they eat the chocolate together while making origami for her mother. Lee appreciates her kind gesture but tells her that it's her snack and that she should eat the larger piece even if she shares it. However, the half-dragon girl argues that Chan is bigger than her and deserves the larger piece. Besides, her mother told her that eating too much chocolate would rot her teeth. She keeps insisting that Lee share the chocolate with her, so he finally agrees, taking half of the bar. Some time later, the manager arrives at the store and greets our protagonist with a cheerful good morning. She comments that Chan must be tired after working all night but stops when she sees him eating chocolate and making origami with a little girl. Chan promptly greets his manager and the woman asks who the girl is. Lee explains that there were no more customers in the store and he lent the scissors to the girl so she could make a gift. He apologizes, saying the girl didn't have enough money to buy the scissors, so he thought it would be quick but ended up taking longer than expected. The manager, however, assures him it's okay and that she understands the situation. She then asks if the child seems shy. Chan agrees, saying kids are often like that at her age. The manager nods but adds that this child is from a very special species. In fact, the girl is a pure-blood dragon. The manager explains that dragons go through a 3-year growth period in their egg state before they are born. During this growth phase, part of their body develops along with their horns, the organ for detecting magical power. She adds that while this isn't an issue for adult dragons, young dragons struggle significantly with it. Young dragons can see others' magical power as colors through their horns, but since they are still young, they cannot control this ability well. Often, magic is detected unconsciously, and the dragon lacks the experience to distinguish people based on color, putting them at risk. This is why judging whether someone is good or bad is something that can only be determined through personal life experiences. Chan asks if his boss means it's dangerous because young dragons don't have that experience yet, and she confirms, explaining that someone's appearance doesn't indicate their character. That's why dragon parents are very protective of their young, especially pure-blood dragons who are raised with stricter guidelines. At that moment, the dragon girl finishes cutting her flower out of the colored paper and proudly shows it to Chan, saying it's ready. The manager approaches the little dragon, complimenting her for doing such a great job, but the girl suddenly bolts, hiding behind Chan and appearing extremely wary of the manager's presence, feeling slightly shaken and offended. The manager tries to convince herself that it's just a misunderstanding. She explains to the half-dragon girl that Lee needs to go home since he worked all night and needs rest. The girl hesitates, so the manager asks if she could come back later. The little dragon looks at Chan, who meets her gaze. He tells her she can leave her project here and return in the morning, whenever she has time to continue her origami. The girl, with a hopeful expression, asks if she can really do that. The store manager assures her that she's always welcome and can visit them anytime. Hearing this, the girl instantly thanks Lee first, then she remembers the manager and thanks her too, calling her ma'am, which slightly offends the manager. Looking to the side, Chan notices that his boss is completely irritated, for some reason unhappy about being called ma'am. The manager asks the girl to call her sister instead, and the half-dragon girl quickly complies. Meanwhile, Lee thinks it's best not to bring up the manager's age now, as it would definitely irritate her further. A little while later, the two watch the young dragon girl leave. Now that the little girl is gone, the manager begins preparing to close the store. She starts humming while Chan looks somewhat puzzled by everything that just happened. Shortly after, the manager asks Lee to open a specific drawer, and he asks which one. She quickly explains which drawer to open, and the boy promptly understands. As he opens the drawer, Lee wonders what his manager is up to inside. He finds a technological globe. His boss explains that it's a magical item called a teleportation machine, used to move their store to different locations. Seeing it, Chan remarks that the item looks both magical and like advanced future technology. The mage proudly says she made it herself. However, she warns him not to touch it carelessly because it designates the areas where the store can operate. If he presses incorrectly, the store will immediately move to a new location, and all the displayed products will also change. Chan replies that he understands. The manager also mentions that the item is easy to use. He just needs to enter his home address into the displayed window. Confused, Chan asks if he should type his address into the holographic screen in front of him, and she confirms. She further explains that she usually handles this, but if she does it, there's a chance they want teleport to Chan's world. She clarifies that for teleportation magic, clear destination information and strong intent are crucial. In other words, if the person hasn't been to a place or doesn't have the will to go there, a teleportation won't happen. Since she doesn't know much about Chan's world, it would be useless for her to operate the machine. Knowing his world better, Chan is the best person for the job. Our protagonist shifts his gaze to the magical item, feeling a bit hesitant. Chan acknowledges that his manager explained the teleportation device is magical, and based on the purification of the dragon scale. She mentioned that magic doesn't affect its constitution. However, he doubts that since his body repels magic, a teleportation might not work even if he tries. His manager, unfazed, reassures him not to worry and to simply trust her. With an excited expression, she insists that it will absolutely work. Seeing her confidence, Chan thinks to himself that at least he should give it a try. He also convinces himself that his manager isn't the type to make him do strange things and asks if all he needs to do is enter his home address on the screen. The girl eagerly confirms and instructs him to focus on wanting to return home desperately. She adds that whether it's a good or bad memory, if he truly wishes to return, the teleportation will succeed. As Chan types in his address, he begins mentally visualizing his desire to go back home. He reflects that while his world is cruel, betrayed by the company he once worked for, it's also a place where he experienced moments of happiness. He remembers the fun times spent with friends in his youth, and how ironic his world feels when he opens his eyes. He realizes his manager is calling him. She asks him to step outside the convenience store and check if it worked. Chan asks if it succeeded, and she replies she's not sure, which is why she's asking him to verify. He walks to the store doors and opens them, witnessing an unbelievable sight. Before him is the familiar sunlit city he knows so well. Looking around, he confirms that it's indeed his neighborhood and marvels at how he teleported back to his world in just 1 second. His manager joins him, stating that this confirms everything. She reveals that Chan's physical constitution can be influenced by his own will. The girl asks what he was thinking when purifying the dragon scale, and he responds that he thought it would be good if it were purified. The manager explains that if his magical resistance were absolute, the magic in the scale would have likely been destroyed, rendering it unusable. In other words, a successful purification occurred because Chan's intent was reflected in his constitution. Confused, Lee asks if she asked him to do that based solely on her hypothesis. She cheerfully confirms, saying it wouldn't have worked otherwise. Ultimately, the conclusion is that Lee can control his magical resistance through his will, and the manager believes this is somehow connected to why he ended up in her convenience store. She adds that she'll need to observe further to understand it fully and asks if Chan has any questions. He replies that he has none, and with an envelope of money and a magical sleeping potion in hand, the manager tells him he's free to leave. Chan does so, and after some walking, arrives at his empty, small, narrow, and old one-room apartment. Looking around, Chan reflects that this is indeed his home and confirms that he's truly returned to the place he used to live. He remarks that he'll have to work that night and decides to set an alarm in advance. Taking his phone out of his pocket, he notices the magical sleeping potion his manager gave him. He muses that he didn't think she'd actually do that for him but wonders if it will work. After setting his alarm, he sits on his bed preparing himself and assures himself that since his manager made it, it will undoubtedly work. Taking the potion, he questions if he'll sleep so deeply that he won't hear the alarm, but it's already too late. Sometime later, he wakes up instantly. It's already night. His alarm blares, and as he fumbles for his phone, he begs for the sound to stop. Looking at the screen, he sees that only a minute has passed since the alarm started, confirming that the potion worked effectively. Stretching as he heads to work, Chan notes that he slept incredibly well thanks to the sleeping potion. He realizes that everything actually happened. It wasn't just a dream. As he wonders if the convenience store remains in the same location, he suddenly finds it right in front of him. Seeing its lights again, he feels deeply impressed. Chan opens the convenience store door and thinks that since the store is truly there, he's now certain it wasn't a dream. However, he wonders if he's the only one who can see this place. When he opens his eyes, he sees someone arguing about why they can't do something. In front of him is a bald person with pointed ears. This being continues arguing for some reason with the manager about the price of some drinks he had consumed. The girl, handling it with a blank, tired expression, listens to his complaints with visible irritation, unaware that he's causing a disturbance. The drunk elf keeps complaining. While the manager grows more annoyed, he keeps begging the manager to let him drink there, while Chan sighs, wishing it were a dream. The manager firmly reminds the customer that drinking inside the convenience store is illegal. She tells him he can't do that, and should pay for the soju and drink it at home, which enrages the bald elf. The drunkard yells, questioning why it's illegal, arguing that it should be wrong to drink in a place that sells alcohol. Chan steps in, explaining that under the law, convenience stores are classified as restaurants and that's why he can't drink there. Furthermore, he can't drink outside the store either, so he should just pay for the alcohol and consume it at home. His manager asks Chan when he arrived, and he replies it wasn't long ago and remarks that she's been working hard. Before she can continue, the drunk elf starts shouting, questioning who Chan is to interfere so suddenly. Lee calmly states that he's an employee, and the elf indignantly asks how Chan dares to address a customer when he's just an employee. The bald elf starts playing the victim, accusing Chan of mocking him because he's an elf and claiming that Chan looks down on him. The customer begins shouting that they're both mocking him because they're humans, while Chan tries to explain that he didn't mean any harm. Without thinking, the elf throws himself on the floor, wailing and declaring that Chan is prejudiced against him. Rolling on the ground, he cries loudly, claiming it's heartbreaking, while Chan urges him to stop, saying it's dangerous. The elf keeps sobbing, and our protagonist attempts to calm the situation until the manager, exhausted, presses a red button. A short time later, a police car arrives at the convenience store. We see a wolf-like officer leading the handcuffed elf to the vehicle. Another officer, an elf herself, is taking the manager's statement and asking if the bald customer didn't pay for his drink. After confirming her story, the manager says she can show the records to the officer. Leading her to a back room, the officer enters the room, assuring the manager it's fine and that she'll return after reviewing the records. The manager tells her to take her time back at the counter. Chan remarks to his boss that elves in this world are quite different from what he imagined. The manager asks what kind of image elves have in Chan's world, and he explains that they are seen as noble and beautiful. Lee comments that he always thought of them as highly refined beings, but witnessing this incident left him disappointed. The manager responds that elves were indeed a noble species before the war. She explains that decades ago, there was significant scientific advancement in their world. As a result, many technological artifacts were developed to make life more convenient for all species, thanks to humans. Other species embraced these advancements, finding their lives more comfortable due to the new science and technology. However, to live even more comfortably, they began developing provinces, which led to the destruction of nature during the process. Most species were satisfied because their daily lives became easier, but one species refused to accept these changes, the elves. They were deeply dissatisfied as their natural homes were destroyed. Eventually, this discontent escalated into a war. Hearing this, Chan asks if the conflict arose because of scientific technology. The manager confirms, explaining that elves are nature-friendly beings who couldn't tolerate the destruction caused by development. Since the elves destroyed many buildings and factories, the other species grew resentful and were forced to choose sides between humans and elves. They would have to choose between following the humans and advancing or staying with the elves and maintaining the current situation. And the decision for this was made unanimously, and they chose to side with the humans. Moreover, even when all the species fought together, the number of elves was enormous. Thus, the war continued for a long time, and after that, they finally made reparations. But the number of elf and human species decreased significantly. Chan then asks what happened to the elves, and the woman explains that after the war ended, the survivors faced discrimination and lived under tremendous oppression. Although this has greatly diminished recently, she asks if our protagonist remembers the elf police officer who checked the cameras, and Chan replies that he does. The manager states that it probably took a lot of effort for her to get that job, even to the point of dyeing her hair blonde and black. She also concludes that it is why if any of the customers were elves, Chan should treat them well, but the boy questions if he should even treat the rude ones well. However, his boss instantly responds that he doesn't have to. The woman comments that our protagonist should simply walk away if a customer yells or curses at him, and that you shouldn't suffer for that reason. Chan states that his boss should leave at that moment since her shift was already over, but the woman replies that she will leave as soon as the police officer returns. The elf police officer, after leaving the room, says she finished checking, and at that moment the manager thanks the officer for her hard work. She asks if she could talk to the elf while heading home, and the woman readily agrees. The elf also states that they will take the elf suspect with them for now, and that a level of punishment will probably be decided after hearing the circumstances. Finally, the manager mentions that Chan can message her if anything happens, and before leaving, the elf officer also thanks Lee for his cooperation. Chan asks his manager and the elf to return safely. Right after the two leave, the boy collapses over the counter. Exhausted, the boy thinks he is already so tired on the second day of his part-time job, and that he should adapt quickly, otherwise he won't last long. At that moment, a customer enters the convenience store, opening the door. A person in his suit questions Chan if he is really being distracted at work. We see that this person is that Chihuahua again, and the dog tells Lee to get up. Immediately realizing who it is, our protagonist wonders if he could expel this customer. Just like his boss had said, our protagonist asks if the Chihuahua is looking for something specific, and the man asks where the toothpaste is. Chan replies that it's in the same place as the toothbrush the dog bought the day before. Completely irritated, the Chihuahua questions why our protagonist is talking like that, and asks if he's going to keep working that way. He orders Chan to properly and sincerely explain where the items are. Chan, even extremely tired, asks the dog to follow him as he will show him. Lee goes to the toothpaste shelf and says the dog can pick any of them. The dog asks which toothpaste is the best there. However, Lee replies that he doesn't know. Hearing this, the dog states that the boy works there and doesn't even know that, and mentions that a customer will only buy something if the employee promotes it well. Although irritated, Chan glances to the side, sees something and has an idea. He asks why the dog doesn't take the buy one, get two offer. However, the Chihuahua replies that he doesn't need 2 tubes of toothpaste, but Lee counters that since one is free, it would be beneficial for it. The customer stares at the promotion while still irritated. After thinking for a moment, the Chihuahua heads to the counter and places a bill on top of his product, saying he will pay now. Lee informs him that the total will be 3,201 and that the price of a bag is 101. asking if the dog will take one, and he agrees. Looking to the side, the dog notices a product that catches his attention, and shortly after, he picks it up. After this, he says he will buy that as well, and Chan replies that total will then be 6,301. Chan also remembers the offer where when you buy a toothpaste, you get another one, but upon mentioning this, the Chihuahua says he doesn't need 2 tubes of toothpaste. He says the boy can keep one, and after handing the dog his change, Chan asks if he can really keep the toothpaste, and the Chihuahua replies that he can. However, our protagonist says he cannot accept it since the dog bought it, so he can't take it. Nevertheless, the dog replies that it is none of his business. Right after that, he leaves the store, leaving Chan still confused about the whole situation in his head. The boy hopes that Chihuahua is not a regular customer there since he is quite difficult to deal with. But putting 2 and 2 together, our protagonist realizes that since the dog came there today, it seems he works nearby and wonders what he would do if the dog came every day. At that moment, someone else walks through the door and Chan looks surprised but quickly greets the new customer. Looking ahead, the boy notices that the customer this time is the same succubus from before. After realizing this and remembering everything he went through with that crazy woman, the boy becomes scared. A succubus, calmly, asks if our protagonist also sells resignation letters. A little later, while the customer is walking through the aisles, Chan calls his boss and informs her that the succubus from the previous day is there again. His boss asks about the woman's condition and he responds that she seems to have had little to drink, but is sweeter than the previous day. The manager asks the boy to also check her condition with a curse detector, and if the result is good, Chan should leave her alone. Our protagonist responds that he will contact his boss if the result seems strange. After hanging up the call, our protagonist wonders what he should do since he is a little afraid she might act like a ghost again, remembering the bonus he received for his work yesterday. The boy affirms that he would work diligently to accept that money. With confidence, he approaches the succubus, politely asking for her attention, and the girl turns her focus to our protagonist. Pointing to the wand in his hand, Lee informs her that he will have to use it if she wants to stay the store and asks if that's okay with her. The girl readily agrees and asks Lee to touch the device to her hand, which he proceeds to do. Chan thanks the girl for agreeing to his request, and embarrassed, she apologizes for what happened the previous day. Chan then asks if she is referring to when she vomited rainbow ice cream in the store, and upon hearing this, the succubus begs him not to mention it again. Covering her face, the girl explains that she went crazy the previous day because she consumed too much magical power while working at her company and truly feels sorry about it. Our protagonist asks what kind of company she works for that could lead to such a situation, and she explains that it's a pharmaceutical company making love potions. Chan confused questions if potions aren't made by magicians. However, the girl clarifies that in the love industry, succubi are the best at it. She explains that their species is exceptionally talented at captivating and fascinating others, being the species closest to love itself. Thus, they work in pharmaceutical companies producing love-related medicines. Alternatively, they work as psychiatrists counseling people with love-related issues, and she is part of a pharmaceutical company. Because her work didn't go well yesterday, she made a mess and apologizes once more. Chan thinks that succubi are quite fascinating in this world. However, something feels off, and Lee then asks why she is considering leaving her job since she was previously looking for a resignation letter. He comments that he thinks the work she does suits her well but wants to know why she wants to quit. With tears in her eyes, the succubus confesses that she has never dated anyone before, and because of that, she doesn't even know what love is. Chan responds that she is succubus. She replies that precisely because of that, she should know what love is, but since she was focused on her studies, there was no romance in her life. She mentions that she is still trying hard because it's her first job, but since she doesn't understand love, her work isn't going well. The girl states that even though she asks her old colleagues about love, they all say different things, leaving her unsure of who to believe anymore. Because of this, she feels that perhaps this job isn't compatible with her, and that's why she was looking for a resignation letter. Lee realizes that the girl is troubled by this and comments to himself that he initially just wanted to test if she was okay, but ended up hearing some personal matters. He then asks the girl to cheer up, explaining that everyone faces tough times when starting their first job. Therefore, she shouldn't think of it as something bad. Upon hearing this, the girl admits that she came to the store because she remembered what Lee had said. After hearing that, the boy seems confused. But immediately, he recalls what he had told her in the taxi and realizes she is probably referring to that. Lee reveals that he actually said it without much thought. However, the succubus stands up, stating that she was shocked upon hearing it. She explains that everyone always says love is easy, pleasant, and joyful, which is both bothersome and harmful, but Chan was the only one who responded differently. And she mentions that it kept spinning in her mind because it was something new. Begging Lee, the girl asks him to explain the meaning of his words and what he thinks about love. She continues, insisting that she really wants our protagonist to answer that. However, Chan thinks he has seen those sparkling eyes before. The young man quickly apologizes for his words, admitting that he spoke without truly understanding love himself, as it was just a spontaneous comment, to be honest. He also confesses that he has never dated anyone before. The customer, hearing this, becomes quite confused and asks why. He responds that the reason he has never dated anyone is because of his face, as it looks boring. The two look at each other for a moment, both confused by the situation and embarrassed. Lee turns his face away crying. He pleads with himself for the succubus to try to understand and go home immediately. As she opens the notes app on her phone, the girl tells Chan that everything is ready for them to start. She explains that before they begin, she will clarify a few things to Lee. No matter what he shares, it will not be leaked to anyone. Additionally, the information will only be used as a reference to help her respond to his doubts more comfortably. As he looks at the girl in front of him, our protagonist thinks he has nothing to tell her about love since he has been single for 29 years. He is certain he won't be of any help to the succubus, and decides to change the subject, suggesting that instead of interviewing people, she should enter a relationship. The girl looks a little confused, and Chan says it's embarrassing to admit, but people around her have probably already tried to match her with someone. He then asks if she has ever been in that situation, and the girl says she has, but avoided it because she was really scared. The succubus explains that she studied a lot about love when she joined her company, and every book and person she consulted described love as something grand, but this something isn't tangible, and she acknowledges that everyone has different experiences with it. Then suddenly, she got a thought. In this thought, she wondered if love was different from what she expected, and when she thought that way, she became scared and avoided relationships at all costs. Embarrassed, the girl quickly says that it's strange since a succubus shouldn't be afraid of love. However, our protagonist replies that it's not strange at all because everyone fears things they can't see. He adds that human emotions especially are hard to understand, and among them, love is the most complex emotion, making it difficult to fall in love still. Since her work is related to love, she should approach it lightly. Confused, the girl asks what he means by lightly. Sean responds that she said love is a great thing, but to be honest, he doesn't agree with that. The girl asks why, and our protagonist reveals that he felt this way after witnessing his friend get married. He explains that when his friend was dating, he bragged a lot about his girlfriend, often saying they were soulmates. But after they got married and started living together, they began noticing each other's flaws, which led to many fights because of this. His friend said he regretted getting married. The succubus comments that it's a shame. Sean agrees, adding that his friend used to say he loved everything about his girlfriend while they were dating, not just him, but when looking around, others seem the same. As love appears to change when circumstances change, but typically something big shouldn't change. However, love does because it's created by people with various emotions. That's why she should approach it lightly and try a relationship at least once. Acknowledging that while love is incredible, it's not always great. However, he advises the succubus to be careful not to develop dangerous romantic emotions. The girl, not fully understanding, asks what he means by dangerous love. He explains that there are two types of dangerous relationships. The first is one-sided love, where one person overwhelms someone who doesn't reciprocate. The second is love from afar, where someone doesn't reveal their feelings and leaves the other person confused. He explains that, in his opinion, these types of love are dangerous because they leave wounds and scars on either side. The boy also states that while they are different types of love, to him, they are just greedy, one-sided emotions because love isn't built by one person alone. Chan comments that he believes it can only be called love when a relationship is established through mutual exchange of feelings, so the succubus should avoid those kinds of love and pursue a comfortable relationship. After noting everything she heard, the girl questions if she can manage that since she considers herself such a frustrating person. With a confident look, Lee assures the girl that she can definitely do it because she is a very attractive person. He adds that it might be a bit rude to say this, but not many men would reject her confession, and that's why she should have confidence and give it a try, and if it became too difficult, she could simply stop. But immediately, Lee shuts his mouth. Shortly after, Lee apologizes for talking so much despite never having been in a relationship before. However, The girl seems happy and comments that it's okay. Moreover, she admits she has also never dated anyone but is still making love potions. She says that, in fact, it's easier to understand someone who also hasn't dated before, but Chan is already uncomfortable with all the comments about him. The young man asks if his customer doesn't need to get ready for work now, and the girl realizes it's already time for the first bus to arrive shortly after. She bids farewell to Chan and thanks him for listening to her, and our protagonist responds that he was happy to help her. Before letting the girl leave, our protagonist hands her a small red box which seems to be something to relieve a hangover. The girl asks why she's receiving it, and Lee explains that since she has to work, it would make her day at work less difficult if she took it. Hearing this, the girl promptly accepts it, taking the box from Chan's hand and thanking him. Just before leaving the convenience store, the girl asks if Lee wouldn't mind her coming back again sometime. Later, while getting ready for her shift, the manager asks Chan if he's sure he wants that succubus customer to return, and the boy responds affirmatively. However, his boss states that her employee doesn't need to welcome such customers so easily next time. She also warns that Chan should be cautious around succubi because they are a species with strong obsessions. If he meddles with them, he could get into trouble, so the young man should be careful, to which Chan responds that he will keep that in mind. The manager comments that she didn't see the pure-blooded dragon girl that day, and Chan replies that she probably still has things to do. Suddenly, the two hear a loud crash and look to the side to see what it was. Chan asks what that noise was, and his manager responds that she doesn't know, but it must be something metal. The two step outside to see a fallen bicycle, and the manager asks if anyone is hurt. They then see that the one who fell from the bicycle is a metal doll, and the manager asks if he's okay. The metal man responds that he's fine and quickly thanks them for their concern. While helping the robot up, the convenience store owner comments that he can't possibly be okay since that metal sound was really loud. The robot apologizes for scaring the girl and then thanks her for her help. The woman also asks why the robot fell, and Chan notices something. The creature reveals that an unexpected situation occurred and the bicycle pedals suddenly stopped working. At that moment, our protagonist responds that the chain fell off, leaving both the robot and the manager confused. Lee explains that the probably fell off because it twisted during a gear shift and it's actually an easy fix. He starts fixing the bicycle while walking everyone through the steps. After a while, he reveals that he managed to fix it, impressing both the robot and his manager. The woman comments that he's amazing for fixing it so easily, and the robot thanks him for his help. Proud, the boss remarks that Chan is truly talented in so many things and very reliable, to which the boy responds that he only knew what to do because he used to ride bicycles a lot. The robot then thanks Chan for fixing the bike and hands him a small card, which turns out to be his work card, saying that Lee can call him for help anytime. Chan and his manager, upon receiving the card, realize that the robot owns a monster hunting business. Our protagonist tries to decline. However, the robot insists on repaying the favor somehow and then bids farewell on his bicycle. The manager waves goodbye to the man and tells him to be careful on his way back. At that moment, the boss reminds Chan that he should also head home and rest because things would be tough the next day, asking if he's ready for it. The girl reveals that the next day is Friday, and realizing this, Chan becomes desperate. And the boy admits he forgot because it's been a long time since he worked in a convenience store, but he remembers that Friday is a crazy party day for workers. Our protagonist begins to explain that the Blazing Friday is also known as the wildest day of the week for anyone working in convenience stores. This is because it's the day when everyone relieves the stress of the past 5 days, and if you wonder how they relieve it, it's with alcohol. Of course, thanks to this, all alcohol stores make a big profit on this day. This includes convenience stores, but the customers in convenience stores are quite different. At that moment, we see an elf sitting on the floor appearing drunk while another person beside him prepares to sing a song holding an alcoholic drink as a microphone. The boy begins singing in a terribly off-key voice. They continue making that noise until, for a moment, someone with wings passes by. We see a half-bird girl dancing to the extravagant noise of the drunkards. At this moment, our protagonist tries to stay calm, just watching the whole scene with an extremely exhausted expression. Lee endures everything without being able to say anything at all. Suddenly, someone steals the bottle from the guy who was singing and then takes the snacks from the other person, spilling everything. Trying to stay calm but clearly frustrated, Chan states that he understands his customers are feeling good because they're drunk. However, they need to pay before touching the products, prompting the two to immediately apologize and head toward the counter. Suddenly, someone screams for Lee's help, and the boy looks in the direction of the sound. The girl that had been dancing earlier appears in front of Chan. Upon seeing her, He is extremely shocked as the half-bird girl throws herself on him. The two other customers drinking turn around and are equally shocked by the scene at that moment. Chan manages to hold the customer in a majestic manner, as if they were performing a rehearsed dance. The drunk customer claims she has finally become a swan, while Chan pleads in his head for her to do that at her own home, struggling to stay upright with her in his arms. He begs the girl to please stop, leave, and go home suddenly. A loud crash is heard and we see a bull accidentally crashing into the entrance door and breaking it. Shortly after, completely drunk and shameless, the creature gets up, showing a piece of the wreckage stuck on its horn. The animal starts wondering where it is, while Chan, desperate, lets go of the bird woman he was holding. He stares deeply at the completely destroyed door, while the bull, still confused, wonders where it crashed. Meanwhile, with tears in his eyes, the protagonist mutters to himself that the animal crashed into a glass door. After some time, we see Chan on the phone with his boss and the woman asks if he's okay. However, with a completely devastated expression, the boy asks for help. Lying in her bed, visibly exhausted, the woman apologizes, saying she feels like she's about to die as well. Covering her face with her hands, she explains that the day was especially bad because unusual customers showed up. She begins recounting how a goblin man asked her to split his payments across multiple cards during checkout, with many customers waiting behind him. And not only that, but an elderly woman suddenly cut the line, leading to a big argument between the goblin and the woman. The two kept shouting at each other to determine who would pay first, while the manager tried to calm the situation. The woman also mentions that demanding customers are normal on Fridays, but that day was particularly difficult. Chan thinks that it seems like the manager had a tough day too, and that there's nothing they could do about it. However, the woman asks if he's really okay. The boy asks why she's asking, and the woman says she thought he might be struggling because he seemed very exhausted the previous day. Looking at the door, our protagonist reflects that he temporarily patched it up with cardboard at that moment. His manager asks if something happened, embarrassed to admit it. Lee hesitates but eventually spills the truth, revealing that a minotaur broke the door. Hearing this, the woman becomes desperate. She immediately asks if the boy is okay and hasn't been hurt, to which he replies that he's truly fine. Additionally, the boy explains that he already got the details of the minotaur responsible for the incident and has made a temporary fix, so she doesn't need to worry for now. After hearing that, there's only silence and the boy thinks the girl must be genuinely surprised that the door was broken. However, he wonders if what he said was too shocking, and if he should have thought more carefully before telling his manager to avoid surprising her so much. At that moment, the girl says she needs to find a tool that could be useful for him, leaving Lee confused as he asks what she's talking about. Our protagonist questions the reason for this, and the girl reveals that she's been thinking about it recently and will prepare a tool for him as quickly as possible. Lee tries to stop her, saying his manager doesn't need to do that, but the girl explains that all species in that world have magical powers. Moreover, each species has abilities based on their characteristics, such as elves who stay youthful and live for a long time, or succubi who are skilled at captivating people, and so on. And in any case, among these species with various abilities, Chan faces the highest risk of being exposed to the dangers of that world because he is from a different place. She states that fortunately, the boy has an anti-magic constitution and can control it with his will, giving him some level of protection. However, they don't know if this ability can protect him from extreme magical powers, and of course, he also can't win physically. So the tool would ensure his safety without burdening him, and Lee simply responds that he'll look forward to it. Finally, the girl says she'll search for some equipment for now and wishes Lee good luck with the rest of his shift. Afterward, Chan thinks that his manager is truly a kind person who genuinely cares about him, even though he's just an employee. The boy also mentions that he should at least buy her something with his first paycheck to repay her kindness, even if just a little. At that moment, someone enters the store, politely addressing Lee, and the boy promptly welcomes the new customer, asking what he needs. The man immediately asks for a pack of blue cigarettes, and Chan quickly turns around to get it before handing over the product. The young man glances at the customer and notices a massive scar on his hand. Chan is immediately shocked and apologizes, explaining that it's his first time seeing such a scar, so he couldn't help but react. The man assures him it's okay since it's rare to see scars like that on a daily basis. It's revealed that the customer has dog-like ears, and he tells Lee not to worry because curious people often react that way. He then asks if he can rest for a while in the convenience store while waiting for something. Our protagonist agrees, thinking it's the first time he's met such a polite middle-aged man. Lee points to a direction, telling the man he can rest comfortably there, and the customer thanks him before leaving, but before that, the man excuses himself and checks his phone. As he watches the customer typing on his phone, Lee notices he's taking quite some time and wonders if the man is busy observing the customer. The boy speculates that, judging by his suit late at night, he might be an office worker pulling overtime. Analyzing further, Chan guesses the man works in finance and boldly asks if he's checking the stock market. However, the customer reveals it's not stocks but something related to his other job. Chan then asks about his job and the wolf explains that he drives for a living. Turning his phone to show the screen, the wolf reveals he works as a driver. A moment later, we see several cars stuck in traffic outside the convenience store. As our protagonist watches, he comments to himself about the many vehicles in the jam. Looking at his customer, he notes that the man, resembling a kobold knight, is quietly checking his driver's service app. The boy realizes there aren't any strange customers tonight, just someone polite, and he finally feels the pleasant rhythm of work hours after so much chaos. With an extremely cheerful expression, the young man wishes that every day could remain this peaceful, but suddenly, the customer stands up and excuses himself. He shows a map application on his phone and asks if Chan knows where a certain location is. Chan apologizes, explaining that he had recently started working in that area and didn't know much about it. The customer responds that it's good to know. He adds that it hasn't been long since he started working as a driver either, and the young man asks if his job is easy. Chan replies that it was until the previous day. But that day, a minotaur broke the door, leaving him completely exhausted. After hearing that, the customer chuckles slightly. He says he was wondering what happened to the door suddenly. Both are startled by a loud noise coming from outside. Lee looks out the window, wondering what happened, only to see that one car has collided with another. They realize there's been an accident between two orcs, and behind one of them is a small kobold in his car, visibly frightened by the situation. Completely irritated, one of the orcs questions how the other got his driver's license, while the other orc begins arguing back. A huge commotion ensues with the dog driving the car behind them looking utterly terrified. Our protagonist, standing outside the convenience store next to the wolfman, is completely baffled by the scene. Chan mutters to himself that he might as well witness orcs fighting while working here, and in fact, the argument seems to be escalating more seriously than expected. Watching the chaos, our protagonist thinks they should call the insurance company first before fighting other races. Passing by comment that orcs are always like this, ignorant and prone to fights. Lee notices that despite the seriousness of the situation, everyone is just passing by. The young man remarks that this truly is a different world. The wolfman asks if Lee won't have any problems, and the young man wonders why. The man explains that Lee won't get any customers if those orcs keep fighting. Hearing this, Lee realizes it's true and notes that everyone seems preoccupied with watching the orcs fight. It really does seem like business isn't going well, and this mess could cause further trouble. The wolfman steps in, declaring hell handle those guys. The wolfman interrupts the fight, calling out to the two orcs, who stop fighting and turn to him. He cheerfully remarks that it's great to see them so energetic, but they should stop fighting and start clearing the street. The two creatures, hearing the old wolf's words, become visibly annoyed and approach him. One of them orders him to stop meddling and just stay out of it, saying that an old wolf should silently mind his own business. The wolf, completely irritated, clenches his fist and punches one of the orcs in the face. One of the creatures begins to fall from the blow, while the other looks shocked by the turn of events. Our protagonist and all the other onlookers from various races are stunned by what they've just witnessed. One of the green men, seeing his companion knocked out, questions why he suddenly fainted. Furious, he charges at the old wolf to take him down. As he attempts to strike, he demands to know what the wolf did, but the man remains strangely calm. The wolf skillfully dodges the orc's punch, stepping back slightly and pivoting on his feet. Then, with the back of his heel, he delivers a solid kick to the creature's neck. After taking down both green men, the wolf remarks that they finally seem subdued. He calls over the kobold, who was trembling from the fight. The dog, startled, reveals himself from where he was hiding behind his car. The wolf tells him that now that the troublemakers are calm, he can call the police and the insurance company. The kobold agrees, thanking him profusely. Chan, having watched the entire scene, is astonished and asks what the wolf used to do before becoming a driver and for that matter what species he belongs to. The man looks surprised by the question. The wolf explains that he's a werewolf, though it's hard to tell since it's not a full moon as for his previous job. He simply says he used to do this and that, but now he's just a retired old man. Hearing this, Chan proudly thinks to himself that somehow, this gentleman seems like a really cool person. The young man thinks that the scar on his hand and the way he fought earlier suggested he probably had a dark past, and the wolf informs him that he would have to work sometime later. We see some patrol cars gathered around the accident site and the wolf thanking Chan for letting him rest in the shop. The boy says it was nothing and shortly after, asks the man if he had a business card or something like that, as many drunk customers often came to that store. And, if there was ever a moment they needed a driver, he wanted to know if they could contact the wolf, and the man says he would be happy to help. Shortly after, he thanks him for everything and hands his card to Chan. Sometime later, we see our protagonist back at the convenience store, staring at the card he had received. While analyzing it, the young man comments that it seemed like just a normal business card and nothing strange about it. Moreover, it didn't look suspicious like the fake ID card he had picked up a few days ago, and that man really didn't seem like a scammer, just a nice person. Sometime later, we see someone entering the store while holding a small puppy, and Lee promptly welcomes the new customer. The unknown person asks Chan for 2 packs of cigarettes, but at that moment, Chan tells him he couldn't bring his pet into the store. We then see that this person was somewhat pufferfish-like, and the fish says his baby didn't pee in random places, so Chan didn't have to worry. The man also asks our protagonist to let the dog stay there just for a moment. The pufferfish also claims his dog was very quiet and didn't even bark. He then mentions that he would leave immediately after buying beer and cigarettes, and please ask Chan to overlook it this time. Lee thinks there wouldn't be any other customers during that time, so it would be fine, and thus Lee says the man could go ahead, but should keep holding the dog. After a while, our protagonist sees a notification on his phone and promptly picks it up to check what it was. Chan sees that the message was from his manager, and she asks Lee if he wanted any specific equipment. The boy thinks he wanted something useful for work. He then asks the manager for a large mop, and the girl asks if there wasn't anything else he wanted. He then tells his manager that she can decide that on her own, and that he would be grateful for anything. After some time, the pufferfish returns to the counter, placing some drinks on it and handing over his card for our protagonist to process the purchase. After typing the amount, the young man runs the card. However, it declines and he informs his customer that the card spending limit had been reached. Upon hearing this, the pufferfish becomes concerned and tells Chan that this was troubling since he didn't have any other cards with him now. The man then says he had no choice and claims he would go home to get his wallet. For this reason, he asks Lee to watch his dog until he returned. Our protagonist becomes extremely confused, and at that moment, the pufferfish states he would be back in 10 minutes with the money to pay the bill. Chan tries to refuse, but at that moment, the pufferfish says the dog didn't bite and was well behaved, so it was fine. The pufferfish also mentions that he would buy everything there, so he would leave the dog with the young man in case he didn't believe he would return. Though extremely uncomfortable, Chan accepts, asking the pufferfish to return quickly, and thus the fish leaves through the convenience store door. After the whole scene, our protagonist is truly surprised that the man had left his dog there as collateral. In his mind, looking at the dog, Chan thinks that, aside from all the craziness he had gone through, he was looking at a very strange pet owner. And even though the situation was complicated, how could someone leave their dog with a stranger? That was really odd. The young man starts petting the puppy while stating that he was the only one really going through a hard time because of the strange owner. He comments that he thinks that, with such an owner, the little dog must have been living a very difficult life, and then he says that if he were the dog, he would have many complaints about life. Suddenly, the dog starts talking, saying he had something to say. He claims he just didn't know if it was right to say it out loud, so there'd have been many days when he hadn't said anything. When he hears this, our protagonist is completely startled and moves away from the animal. The little dog, with a very cheerful expression, asks if he can say something to Chan. Surprised by this situation, our protagonist asks if the dog could talk. He promptly replies yes. Lee asks why the dog hadn't spoken in front of his owner before, and the dog answers that he usually didn't talk and needed to be more cautious, especially around his owner. Chan asks why, and recalling his past, the dog reveals that his owner always threatened him whenever he spoke or barked. In his mind, Chan concludes that, as expected, that pufferfish wasn't a good owner. Our protagonist then asks for the dog's name and age. The dog reveals his name is Puppy, and that he's 2 years old. Lee praises him, saying he speaks very well for being so young. Puppy explains that dogs are already adults at 2 years old. Then Chan asks the puppy if he's ever heard of another dog that speaks so well. However, Puppy reveals that he hasn't, as other dogs simply enjoy their time with their owners and bark. Finally, he says he's never seen a dog that could talk like him. In fact, he thinks all dogs fear having their vocal cords removed and thus remain silent without speaking. Finally, he asks Lee if he's strange, but Chan replies he's not sure as he doesn't know much. However, he states that it seems like everyone loves their dog. Lee mentions that one of his acquaintances even took a trip abroad with his dog, and Puppy, upon hearing this, responds with envy. Chan asks if this kind of treatment happens often, his owner using him as collateral, and the dog replies that he doesn't want to talk about it. He mentions that the pufferfish keeps fighting with his wife because of him, and whenever he's drunk he acts strangely, but since he's fed and has a place to sleep thanks to his owner, he's still enduring it. However, the dog admits that sometimes he thinks about wanting to leave his owner. Chan yells that the dog should talk this over with the pufferfish, but Puppy retorts that he'd probably be punished if he did. Lee says that, honestly, he thought his owner wasn't a good person while listening to the dog, but it would be harder for him to live on the streets than at home. Instead of going through that, the dog should have a proper conversation with his owner, and the situation could improve at least a little. After receiving so much advice, the dog agrees and says he'll do what. Our protagonist notes that it's been over 10 minutes and asks where the dog's owner is, though. Puppy replies he doesn't know and admits he's waited for more than an hour before. The boy comments that the little dog has truly been through a lot. After thinking for a moment, Puppy asks if he can ask one more question to our protagonist, and Chan agrees. The dog then asks Lee what neutering surgery is. He reveals that he overheard his owner and his wife saying he would have the surgery next Monday with an extremely happy face, without even knowing what he's talking about. He asks what it is and why he has to have that surgery. Chan, outraged, promptly tosses some papers onto the table. The boy states that he will explain it easily through drawings for the puppy, and tells him to calm down and listen carefully. Chan begins to explain that, in this generation where almost everyone has pets, neutering surgery is one of the most critical concerns of pet owners. For males, the surgery prevents prostate hyperplasia and testicular tumors, and for females it prevents mammary tumors and other issues. He explains that many pet owners choose neutering surgery to keep their animals healthy, but pets aren't forced to have it. Another option owners choose is to pair their pets with a compatible partner and let them live with their new family. Chan mentions that this is a choice made for pets they love. Therefore, owners have many concerns before choosing any option. However, how would this decision be if the animal could talk? At that moment, we see Puppy shouting that he doesn't want it. The dog starts yelling that he'll never have that surgery, not even if he has to die, and he questions why he has to go through such a cruel procedure. He begins to recall the bad things he did during his life and wonders if that is the reason, but Chan states that it's not because of those things but for his well-being. However, the dog asserts that Chan shouldn't say such nonsense because even if it's for his own good, he can't allow them to take that away from him. Right after he asks if for any reason, Chan would undergo such neutering surgery. However, the boy yells that the dog is crazy and asks why he would ever do that. After saying this, the little dog starts shouting, claiming that it makes no sense for him to receive such punishment when no human would ever accept it. Moreover, he declares that this surgery is humiliating, extremely humiliating, and at that moment, the dog begins to cry. The poor animal laments that he hasn't even met his companion yet, formed a family or lived forever with them. The dog also mentions that he has just become an adult dog, old enough to see his offspring, and he can't believe he'll soon be infertile, which makes him sad. The dog begins to wonder what kind of sin he committed in his past life to deserve this, and in his mind, Chan thinks maybe he shouldn't have explained it. Our protagonist gives the little dog some water to calm him down a bit. Shortly after, he asks if the dog is a bit calmer, and the dog apologizes for what he caused and for his indecent behavior. He mentions that, since it's something very scary, he ended up acting that way without realizing it, and Chan tells him not to worry because it's alright. At that moment, Chan says that, by the way, now that the dog knows what neutering surgery is, he should tell his owner that he doesn't want it. After all, perhaps his owner will understand his concern. However, the dog states that there's no need to say that. The animal claims that he's not happy and he has had this owner-animal relationship with a pufferfish since birth, so he always thought he had to follow him faithfully. However, living that way can't be called living, and to live his life the way he wants, hell sever ties with his owner. The dog thanks Chan because, thanks to him, he made that decision, but immediately, our protagonist asks him to wait as he only suggested the dog talk to him. However, the animal says there's no need to do that. Chan insists that he reconsider since the dog will suffer a lot outside, but he asserts that he doesn't care as hell suffer equally inside and outside the house. And this was a situation where his peanuts were in danger, so the right decision was to leave the house, and Chan actually replies that it's reasonable. The dog says that, in any case, he's already made his decision and hopes Chan will help him. Shortly after, he asks the boy to remove his collar. Our protagonist does so, but in his head, he wonders if what he's doing is right, and if the dog has really made up his mind. After shaking quite a bit, now with his neck free, the dog says he feels renewed, and Chan asks how else he can help the dog. The dog mentions that before leaving, he'd like Lee to help him have a conversation with his owner. Chan asks if the animal will say goodbye before leaving, and the dog replies yes, as even though they didn't have a good relationship, he still has affection for him, and even though he's completely furious, he wants to clarify things. Lee agrees, and at that moment the pufferfish finally returns and enters the convenience store. Our protagonist is relieved that, at least, the pufferfish returned quickly, and at that moment, the creature wonders what's going on. He looks at his dog and asks why his collar is off his neck, questioning if Chan removed it. Lee tries to start explaining and informs him that his dog has something to say, leaving the pufferfish very confused. Upon hearing this, the fish says this is nonsense. But at that moment, the dog calls out to his owner. The little dog says he's asking just to confirm, and shortly after, he questions whether the man really went home to get his wallet after leaving him there. He then asks if the pufferfish is genuinely planning to neuter him next week, and the fish starts fumbling over his words. At that moment, the dog simply realizes he's right and thanks him for the answer. As he walks out of the store, he says he'll go his own way and leave his owner's side from that day forward. For this reason, her owner should no longer ask why nor worry, and moreover, he should stay healthy. Before leaving, the dog says he wants to say one last thing. Chan, watching this scene, feels confused, and suddenly the dog asks one last time if he could return later that day to the shop. Our protagonist prepares to answer, but at that moment, the pufferfish is completely in shock at everything he's witnessing. Lee finally agrees and asks the dog to come back later. But before leaving, the dog thanks him. He also says he hopes Lee's business goes well, and after the dog departs, the pufferfish remains in shock. Trembling, the creature tries to understand everything he saw and questions what had just happened in front of him. He begins to inflate, tearing all of his clothes while shouting his dog's name. Our protagonist, after some time, cleans up the mess left by the pufferfish while stating that peace had finally returned. In a flashback, he recounts that after the puppy escaped, the pufferfish ran after him to try to reconcile. In his mind, the young man wonders if this means the fish still loved his pet, even though he hadn't been a good owner. However, he didn't know and decided to let them resolve it on their own, stretching as he thought about it. But suddenly, someone arrives on a bicycle, calling for our protagonist, who quickly looks to the side. Chan sees that it's the pureblood dragon girl, the same little girl who was preparing the Mother's Day gift. The young girl, with an extremely cute and sweet expression, says hello to the boy. Inside the store, we see Chan wiping the little girl's runny nose. Lee asks if the young girl has caught a cold, but she says no. Our protagonist notices something strange and asks why the girl is sniffling so much if she isn't sick, and she tries to explain that her nose is itchy. But at that moment, she sneezes and a small flame comes out of her nose. Since she's a dragon, the girl continues to sneeze involuntarily, while Chan thinks she's really sneezing a lot. While a little dragon covers her nose, Chan asks her to wait a moment as he prepares something, and the girl agrees. Shortly after, he goes to a machine inside the convenience store and grabs one of its cups. The boy presses the button for hot water and begins to prepare something. Chan starts making a drink while the dragon girl watches the scene. He explains to the girl that she needs to take some medicine to feel better, and that he'll give her chocolate after she takes the medicine. The girl becomes embarrassed and says she doesn't like medicine. The dragon thinks of a lie and claims she doesn't have any money today, so Chan doesn't need to give her anything. However, the boy realizes she's making excuses. He explains to the girl that if she doesn't take the medicine now, she'll need to get a strong shot later, and the girl is quite surprised by this. Chan asks if she still doesn't want the medicine. However, she agrees and stretches out her hands to take it. By the way, he asks why the young girl didn't come on Friday morning to see the gift. She explains that she went to piano class because she has lessons on Friday mornings, and upon hearing this, the boy thinks the girl is truly hardworking. However, Chan mentions that the girl shouldn't give the gift to her mother because of the cold, as it would be problematic if the gift caught fire. When she sneezed, the girl responds that she only came to greet the boy today since convenience stores are places where you have to buy at least something. However, she doesn't have any money with her now, so she'll return later when she saves more money. Chan asks how much she needs to save. She reveals she needs to gather 2,001 and says her mother gives her 501 every 4 days, but Chan realizes there's less than 2 weeks left until Mother's Day. Lee feels proud of the girl, but at this rate, she won't be able to make all the gifts by Mother's Day and can't keep selling something to a child every day. In his mind, he wonders what he should say to the girl coming there just to hang out until he looks at some lollipops nearby. Then he has an idea and as a reward gives 2 lollipops to the girl because she took the medicine, and the girl promptly accepts. Then he asks how much money the young girl has at the moment, and she responds that she has 501. Chan replies that's good since 2 of those candies cost 501 in total. Moreover, there are many snacks there that she could buy with 501, and tomorrow he would talk to her about the snacks, so if the girl isn't busy, she can come by any time with 501. And upon hearing this, the girl is surprised and quickly agrees to the idea. Shortly after, she says she'll buy the candies Chan is offering, and they make the exchange. For some reason, the girl keeps staring at the 2 lollipops, and our protagonist asks what's wrong and if she wants a different flavor. The little girl asks which flavor Chan likes, and he wonders why the dragon is offering the candies back to him, suggesting she should save them to eat later. However, with a cute expression, she replies that she also has to drink the chocolate he's going to give her, and her mother told her that if she ate too many sweets in one day, she could get childhood diabetes. And our protagonist realizes the girl's mother scares her with many things, but with an extremely sweet expression. She also states that sharing delicious things with friends makes them taste even better. Lee accepts and says they'll eat together, thinking he doesn't have much choice at the moment, and the girl asks which flavor he likes. The young man replies that he prefers something sour, and the dragon decides she'll take the chocolate. Looking at the gift in his hand, Lee thinks he's taking things from a child again. He wonders if all the children in the world today are like this little girl, since there were no innocent and kind children like her in his time. He remembers that last time, the manager said a dragon could distinguish others' emotions by their colors, but he doesn't think the dragon would follow anyone based solely on that. At that moment, the little girl says she's curious about something. Shortly after, she asks if our protagonist lives near the store, and Chan replies that he lives about 3 minutes away. The little girl becomes very excited, saying he really does live nearby, and Chan asks if she also lives around there. She replies no, as it takes her about an hour to get home by subway, and Lee asks if her school is at least close by. The little girl says yes, since this is the Academy District, and she gets off at the station and goes to her school, which is very large and has many older and younger siblings attending. But there are also many children her age, and moreover, the little girl mentions that her mother's company is near the area. Chan thinks her school sounds very different from a normal one, and finally, he asks if that's why she rode her bike to come to the store. The girl responds yes, since the bike belongs to her mother's company. The two then step outside the convenience store, and the little dragon points in a direction. We see a huge building with the letter K on it, and she explains that she usually goes home with her mother after school, but yesterday she stayed overnight at her mother's company. Chan comments that the girl's mother also works at a good company, and she replies that she does and loves spending time with her mother, but she has other reasons to like even more, and Chan asks what those reasons are. She reveals that it's because Chan lives nearby. This means they can now see each other more often, and she's very happy about that. However, Lee reveals that he doesn't plan to work there for long. In his mind, our protagonist thinks he should work at a company again and only plans to work there until he gets hired elsewhere. But it's clear that he's been going through all kinds of abnormal experiences, like the exploding fake ID card, or when he purified dragon scales, or when he was scolded by a chihuahua for a toothbrush. And he even consulted a succubus about love despite never dating anyone, and he wonders where else he could experience such things if not there. However, he can't work as a part-time employee at a convenience store his whole life just because of that, and at that moment the little girl looks sad. Seeing that he made a mistake, our protagonist wonders if he was too honest with the poor little girl. Shortly after, he pats her head and says it's not like hell, stop working there immediately, so she shouldn't be upset. The poor girl asks if that's true, and Chan replies that it is, and he said it to make her worried so she wouldn't get close to adults she doesn't know well. The girl asks why, and Lee explains that it's not good to get close to someone you don't know, asking if her mother hadn't already told her about this. Chan reveals that he's saying this only for her safety so she shouldn't forget it. However, the girl replies that even so, Lee helped her make the Mother's Day gift and he also gave her medicine to stop sneezing, and no matter what, Chan helped her a lot. So to her, Chan was a good adult. Hearing this, our protagonist feels truly embarrassed and quickly asks the girl to buy drawing paper when she comes next time. Sometime later, we see Chan organizing a few things when his manager arrives, greeting him with a cheerful good morning. She comments that the door was really a bit broken and that Chan worked hard yesterday. The boy says he's glad she recognized his work. The manager makes a small surprise sound and reveals that this is why her subordinate worked so hard the previous day. Our protagonist turns around and sees a smartphone and asking what it is. The one explains that it's the equipment she prepared for her employee. The manager says she had an unused phone at home, so she customized it and brought it here. She added various features so Chan could use it. She says she'll teach him how to use it. However, upon looking at her face, Chan notices something and asks if she's okay. But the woman reveals that she's exhausted. She explains that the mark on the phone indicates it's certified and that this shield-shaped app is defensive magic that activates automatically. The woman also mentions that the other icon is restoration magic. The manager explains that he can use it just like a camera app and should focus on what he wants to fix before taking a picture. Then, he should follow the app's instructions. She asks if there's anything Chan doesn't understand, but he replies that he's okay for now. The manager then says they'll use the phone at that moment, and the young man opens the camera app while starting to focus on what he wants to repair. When pointing it at the door, the phone informs him that he must specify the desired time and press the reverse button. The young man asks if he should just press that button, but the manager tells him to stay still and not move, becoming quite nervous. She explains that using the recovery magic app requires complete stillness to avoid errors. So he must remain absolutely still. The young man says he understands. The woman then instructs him to simply press the button and wait until the image of the door fully appears. While showing how tired she still is, the young man presses the button, and at that moment, a scene from the past begins to appear on the phone screen. It goes back to the moment when the ox broke the door, and the young man is impressed by the technology. At a certain point, it finally goes back to before the door was broken, and the manager asks him to stop immediately, which the boy does in his mind. Chan thinks that everything that had previously happened was being replayed, and it's incredible. His manager says he should now press a button to restore the door. The young man does so, doubting that it will actually make everything go back in time. Since such a thing was simply impossible in his world, a strong light emanates, illuminating the faces of Chan and his manager, leaving him shocked by the scene unfolding. A blue magic aura appears where the cardboard door once was and starts dismantling it, as if literally reversing time. The magic expands, and everything that was once broken begins to reassemble itself, including the glass. After a while, the door is finally restored to its original state, and all that light even leaves the manager. Impressed Lee, after witnessing this, is utterly stunned, completely amazed by the situation. As he opens the glass door, the manager comments that it was a great success. The woman asks if Chan thinks everything has been properly fixed, and the young man asks if there are really no issues with the function. She asks what kind of problems he's referring to, and the young man explains that now that he's seen it, it seems like the magic ruins everything in time. And the customers who pass through the door appear on that phone like the ox that destroyed the door or the wolf that helped him before. That's why, feeling quite confused, he asks if there's any chance this magic could affect the customers, because if that happened, the customers might transform into children. But the manager tells him to wait, assuring him that he doesn't need to worry about that. She explains that the magic is related to time, but it can't be cast on living creatures, and no one in the world would be capable of performing such a feat. The boy comments that he's relieved, but still, all of it was unexpected. The manager explains that time magic is an unknown area and is still under research. She informs him that magicians worldwide have been studying it for decades, but no progress has been made, so it's impossible to cast this type of magic on living creatures. For that reason, Chan shouldn't worry and should just use it comfortably. The boy agrees, thinking he might have worried for no reason. Shortly after, he asks if he can really use the phone, and she promptly says yes, mentioning that she stayed up all night preparing it for him. Chan asks if she really stayed awake just for that, and she replies yes, as there are many things you need to prepare to use the phone. Lee, confused, asks why, and she explains that the phone is special, equipped with a magic stone that allows it to download magical formulas and cast spells. However, she mentions that a lot of data is needed to download the formulas, so Chan should ensure he's connected to Wi-Fi and should use it carefully. Impressed, our protagonist remarks how incredible the manager is and asks where she got such a phone. She replies that someone she knows gave it to her. She also mentions that she'd have forgotten about the phone all this time but remembered it and gave it to Chan. The boy thanks her, saying hell use it well. Finally, the manager asks if the boy is curious about anything, and he says yes, still confused by everything that happened the previous day. He asks if there's any chance a dog in this world could talk. The manager states that, no matter what she thinks, the puppy is probably a mystical creature, and Chan remarks that in his world, a mystical creature is a divine animal. The woman explains that it's similar, but has a slightly different meaning in this world, where beasts with powers are called mystical creatures. She further clarifies that, regardless of the animal species, it's classified as mystical if it has a special ability. Moreover, most of these creatures are very intelligent and can understand almost all languages, which is probably what the dog is. Additionally, she mentions that it's been a long time since she last heard of a talking dog, and Chan comments that the puppy didn't seem to know it was a mystical creature. The woman states that there are other creatures with abilities beyond high intelligence, and in those cases they realize their abilities through simple opportunities, but thinking about the fact that the puppy said it would return again makes the manager worried. Chan asks why, and she explains that, as mentioned before, mystical creatures are really rare, so it's usually hard to see them for this reason. Such creatures have enormous value and are quite expensive on the market. In other words, Chan could receive at least 10 billion won by selling such a creature, and in his mind he notes that the pufferfish man must be deeply regretting it. That's why the manager mentions that she's worried, as something dangerous could happen, and Chan replies that for now hell, just head home. As Chan leaves, the woman says the forecast predicts rain later, so he should be careful when he returns, and the boy agrees shortly after he walks out the door, and sometime later at night we see the convenience store once again. Chan is inside, thinking that it's starting to rain heavily now. In his head, he considers how he'll have to mop the floor despite all the rain and how it'll also be a hassle to take out the trash. Suddenly, his phone starts vibrating and he notices that he's received a new message. It's from his manager, explaining that the phone also has a translation app and he can feel free to use it whenever he needs. Additionally, the girl sent a photo commenting that she was eating seafood with green onion pancakes, and Chan was probably feeling envious at that moment. The young man thinks it's truly not easy to find a manager like his while working part-time anywhere. He wonders what he should give his manager after receiving his first paycheck. Just as someone enters the convenience store, the customer calls Chan distracted and asks where the umbrella stand is. It turns out to be at Chihuahua again, saying he won't enter the store until Chan brings the umbrella stand to him. Sometime later, we see the dog pointing at a drink, asking Chan if it's good. Lee replies that he's not sure, and the dog demands that Lee listen to him, and asks why he's being so difficult. In his mind, trying to stay calm, Lee thinks about many things but simply asks the customer to visit another store if he's just going to keep bothering him. Our protagonist informs him that the drink also comes with a buy one, get one free deal, and asks why the dog doesn't take it. The dog replies that he doesn't need to. Still trying to convince his customer, Lee explains that he won't lose anything by making this purchase. The dog sighs and decides he has no other choice, taking his drink to the counter. The dog suggests that Lee drink one of the beverages, but the young man becomes quite startled as he'd be accepting something from his customer again. Chan excuses himself, explaining that his customer already gave him something before, and that he might accept if it were necessary, but he could get into trouble since it's alcohol. The dog asks if Chan has never had a drink while working late, and the young man reveals that he hasn't, as employees aren't allowed to drink at work since it's prohibited. The Chihuahua admits that he does it sometimes. However, Lee questions if he's really allowed to do that at his company. The dog explains that if a company doesn't want employees drinking, it shouldn't make them work on weekends. He asks Lee if he thinks anyone could work for their company sober during their precious weekend, while Chan internally thinks the customer will surely get fired. Later, under the moonlight, we see that winged horse flying through the air again with Yuna riding on its back. The girl turns and starts heading toward the convenience store. After a while, she finally lands in front of the store to talk to Chan. Before entering, she asks her horse to wait outside for a little while. Completely enthusiastic, the girl enters the convenience store, shouting that she's there while calling for Chan. She asks how our protagonist is, but upon taking a closer look, she notices he's staring at a drink in front of him. The young woman snaps the boy out of his trance, asking if he's going to drink that, and Chan finally returns to reality. Realizing Yuna is there, Chan immediately hides the explaining that a customer gave it to him, and he was thinking about what to do with it. Additionally, he states that he's also worried about the customer, and Yuna asks why. The young man reveals that his customer is a kobold with a chuckwaho-like face, and he's worried that he might get fired from his company. Yuna comments that it's indeed unusual. The girl mentions that the part-time job suits Chan, because he cares about his customers. On the other hand, she says she tried working there, but found it difficult. Our protagonist asks if the girl worked there before, and she replies yes, but only for a short period before quitting. She explains that despite working for a short time, there were many unpleasant customers, and for those customers, openly insulting her was just the basics. Additionally, there were many customers who left snack packages on the floor after eating them and shamelessly asked for refunds. On the other hand, her sister tried to calm the situation, and Yuna mentions she could have endured it if it could only happen once or twice. But it kept happening, and she ended up raising her fist at a customer. It made her completely furious, and she nearly hit a customer because of it. However, she states that she didn't hit the customer that time because her sister stopped her, but she quit immediately afterward. Chan remarks that it's fascinating. Chan asks why she's there today since it's not delivery day, and she suddenly remembers something while commenting that she almost forgot. The girl reveals that she wasn't there for deliveries. Instead, she needed the boy's help. The young man is quite confused, so Yuna asks him to look at something specific. Our protagonist is startled as she pulls out a magical monster core from her backpack that looks like a heart, then asks if Chan could touch it. Shurjen tries to say please, but Chan immediately refuses. In disgust, Yuna assures him that it's not actually dangerous, and that he just needs to purify it like he did with the scale. However, Chan says he doesn't want to touch that gross thing. First, he asks why he should touch it, and also what a magical core it is. Yuna explains that the monsters emerging from the gates are called magical monsters, and this core is akin to their hearts. The core is a fragment of magical power, so its energy level is high. It's commonly used as an energy source for trains, which makes the core expensive. In fact, it's related to the monstrous products her sister ordered. Upon hearing this, Chan asks if the manager ordered her to bring that too, but Yuna reveals no, as her sister requested something different. She asks if Chan remembers the dragon scales, and he responds that he does. Yuna explains that the product her sister ordered is a stuffed monster. She says purification is also important for stuffed monsters, but she couldn't fully trust the company, so she wanted to check. She explains that if the magical core purified by the company doesn't react to Chan, then her sister's order will likely have no issues either. Finally, she asks if Chan can do it, and the boy seems a bit hesitant. Our protagonist wonders if he should simply touch it with his eyes closed since Yuna said it was safe. He also mentions that the manager always does her best to make him feel comfortable. Meanwhile, the manager is shown soundly asleep at home. Determined, the boy clenches his fists, declaring that he'll at least repay his manager in some way. The young man asks if he should just touch it for a moment, and Yuna, seeing that he says yes, she assures him that it's already been purified and will be fine, so he can feel confident it's safe. The young man closes his eyes, saying he'll do it, and then reaches out to the dragon core. Moments later, we see Chan and Yuna running out of the convenience store after a purple explosion. Completely out of breath, Lee is deeply confused. He looks back at the destruction the item caused. He shouts at Yuna, reminding her that she said it would be fine and not dangerous, then asks what's up with all the smoke that smells like poop. Trembling, the boy can't believe that item was so hazardous. Clenching her fist, Yuna curses someone. Angry at what she just witnessed, she questions how those idiots lied about their work like this, saying she'll have to kill them all. She begins leaving the area and explaining that she'll return after calling the company. Chan simply watches his manager's sister turn the corner and leave. Our protagonist, on the other hand, comments that Yuna seemed furious and wonders what he should do. He notes that he can't even go back inside the store because of the smell, and if it continues, no customers will come today. Suddenly, someone arrives, asking Chan if there was a magical monster core inside the convenience store. He greets the newcomer and remembers it's the robot who fell off a bike near the store last time. With an enthusiastic expression, the robot thanks Chan for remembering him. However, he explains that the smoke and smell are likely from a core being purified. He then asks if they were handling a magical core inside the convenience store, and Chan replies that maybe they were. Apologizing, Chan informs the customer that they'll probably need to visit another store for now since it's hard to manage to shop at the moment. Meanwhile, on the phone, Yuna is visibly furious, calling someone a fraud and questioning the nonsense they're saying. She continues arguing with the company, declaring that she'll sue them since she was completely deceived. But they don't seem to care much after that. She says she was right and will take pleasure in suing those fraudsters, then ends the call. Completely furious, the girl punches the wall, denting it slightly. She leans on it, trying to breathe and calm herself down from the whole situation. Chan asks the girl if she's okay, and she apologizes, saying she got angry because of that company. Lee asks what they said, trying to remain calm. She explains that those lying idiots claim they did their job correctly, but that was impossible. Since they saw the result on top of that, they even ask if it was their mistake. Hearing this, Chan thinks it's definitely a black market operation. Shortly after, Lee asks what they should do about the smoke and smell, but she says she doesn't know as all the companies are likely closed because it's the weekend. She comments that she shouldn't have asked Chan for help, it only caused trouble for him and her sister, but Lee replies that it's fine after all, it's not her fault. However, the robot reveals that he'll take a look, leaving Chan and Yumna quite surprised. He explains that he can handle the situation immediately, but Chan feels a little hesitant. The robot says he was deeply moved when Chan helped him with his bike last time and was treated so kindly for the first time in his life, and that's why he wants to repay the favor. He also assures them there's no problem and hopes Chan will leave it to him, as he'll take care of the issue right away. A while later, Yumna and our protagonist are watching the robot enter the store. The girl, somewhat sad about having ended up asking for a customer's help, wonders if that mechanical doll is a regular customer there. Chan replies that he isn't, and that the robot only fell in front of the store because of his bike, so he and the manager helped him. The girl is surprised, commenting that both Chan and her sister are truly kind-hearted. However, she asks Chan what the robot could possibly do, and at that moment we see with a scanner the creature begins computing some data while our protagonist mentions that the robot had said he owned a monster-slaying factory. Yumna realizes that's why the robot seems so confident, and at that moment the metal figure extends two electrified prongs from its fingers. Chan asks what Yumna is talking about, and she explains that robots are excellent at craftsmanship, and if this one was skilled enough to own a factory, it meant his abilities were top-notch. She assures Chan they can trust the robot, as the creature starts inserting the two electrified prongs into the magical beast core. Afterward, an electric shock occurs, followed by an extremely loud reaction. A bright light fills the small convenience store, turning the dark night into what feels like a brightly lit day. Our protagonist and Yumna, watching this scene, are completely astonished and bewildered. After some time, the robot walks out holding the magical beast core in its hands, stating that the purification was 100% complete and the object had been properly treated. Yumna congratulates him, and Chan asks if he's okay given the massive electrical discharge. The robot explains that this phenomenon is normal during purification. Our protagonist also notices that the object's color has changed, and the mechanical figure explains that perfect purification turns them white like this. However, he adds that the post-analysis confirmed the purification was done twice and recommends Yumna never do business with that company again. The girl asks why, and the robot explains that his analysis confirmed the first purification process was only 80% complete, which was dangerous. We see a flashback of goblins plotting to use less purified water on the object to save costs, and the robot explains that the price of purified water has been rising. He adds that the people performing the purification likely cut corners to save money. Hearing this, Yumna becomes absolutely furious, exuding an intimidating aura. Yumna calls them bastards and vows to break the bones of everyone involved in the purification. The robot comments that many companies operate this way nowadays, and he even understands why. Chan asks what he means, and the robot explains that since March, gate activations have decreased, making it harder to obtain monsters. As a result, factory work has declined significantly, leading companies to resort to such dangerous shortcuts. In fact, he mentions that he hasn't received any work requests either. Feeling frustrated, he decided to take a stroll. Chan reassures him not to worry about it anymore, as he has some news. He tells him that Yumna is looking for a new business partner. Yumna confirms this, saying they have plenty of work requests that would keep the robot busy. She then asks if the robot would like to sign a contract with them, and he immediately agrees, stating he'll sign it right away. As Yumna shakes hands with her new partner, she suggests they head straight to work, and the robot eagerly agrees. After walking off with Yumna, the robot stops for a moment, turns back, and asks if the second purification was done by Chan. The boy confirms it. The robot comments that the convenience store didn't have any equipment or purified water. So he's curious about how Chan managed it. The boy thinks he shouldn't reveal his anti-magic constitution. But the blue-haired girl steps in to defend him. Stating it's a secret, she quickly asks the mechanical figure to understand that it's confidential and not to ask about it anymore. Later, we see our protagonist using his magical phone to repair a broken part of the convenience store. After watching Yumna depart on her Pegasus with the robot, Chan reflects that he still won't find peace today and wishes his days could be calmer sometime later. He notices a notification from Yumna on his phone informing him that she had asked for his number from her sister. She starts bombarding the boy with messages, informing him that the mechanical doll praised his purification skills and that the object was almost perfectly purified. Confused in his thoughts, our protagonist wonders if Yumna is really just a delivery girl considering how she spoke about monsters earlier. It seemed like someone with significant experience, not to mention how strong she was. Thus, the boy concludes that Yumna probably isn't just a regular delivery girl and that there's some mystery behind her. Imagining the challenges delivery people must face, the boy wonders if only the strongest delivery workers survive in that world. Stretching, he mutters that he doesn't know and plans to ask Yumna about it later. He then wonders if the smell from his convenience store has finally dispersed. At that moment, a girl stands behind a wall wondering what she should do, and Lee notices her. He asks the stranger if she's okay, and the girl promptly replies that she is. Chan wonders if he startled the girl, but upon closer inspection, he realizes it's the same succubus from the previous days once again. She looks at Chan and apologizes for bothering him while he's working. The girl apologizes again, explaining that she went to a club with her seniors, but they left her behind and completely disappeared while crying. The girl wonders why people can be so mean and how they dared leave her alone. Chan notices that for some reason the girl looks different, and in his mind, he wonders if this is the transformation of a woman he's heard about. However, her being there after visiting a club feels odd, so he asks why she's there. Chan asks if she didn't go to the club to have fun, saying it would have been fine if she'd enjoyed herself there alone without her seniors. However, he then asks if she went there to find true love, but the girl responds that it doesn't work like that. She explains that it was her first time in a club that day, and she only went because her seniors forced her. She couldn't find true love in such a place. In other words, she was entirely coerced and dragged there. The succubus explains that she told her seniors she wanted a relationship and asked them for advice. However, they took her to a club after she said that. Once there, her seniors told her that real-life experience was necessary and shoved her into a separate corner alone. She recounts feeling utterly confused about why she was there. While grappling with these questions, a squid man suddenly asked her to dance, making things extremely awkward. The succubus also mentions that her seniors were busy mingling with others, paying her no attention. And when she mustered the effort to push the Triton aside, other guys kept approaching her, moving their bodies awkwardly toward her. With tears in her eyes, the girl says she felt like she was going to die from all the weirdness happening. She expresses her hatred for her seniors, while our protagonist thinks the girl has had another rough day. Chan asks if the girl's seniors didn't give her any other advice. Even though it seems she's really been through a lot, the poor girl recounts that her seniors suggested other things too, and Chan tells her that clubs are typically where people start relationships. He then asks what she thinks about trying other methods. However, the girl says one senior suggested a dating app to her, but she didn't know how to register since it was her first time. Determined to help, Lee asks if he can borrow her phone for a moment, and the girl agrees. After installing the dating app, he tells her they should take a photo of her first to use in the app, and she agrees. However, as our protagonist points the camera at the succubus, he notices her expression is completely blank. Chan spontaneously scolds her, saying she should smile naturally, but the girl responds that she gets nervous when she knows someone is taking her picture. She mentions feeling ridiculous because her makeup is slightly smudged and that she doesn't photograph well. That's why she doesn't even take selfies. But at this moment, Chan breaks the mood by saying the girl is truly very beautiful. He adds that she's always been very beautiful. However, today she looks especially stunning. So he simply asks the girl to give him a beautiful smile. Caught off guard by all the compliments, she gives a sweet smile and asks why Chan is saying those things. Chan takes advantage of the moment to snap her photo, and then tells her it's all set. She just needs to fill in her information and write a greeting on her profile. Once she does, the app will automatically match her with someone. She fiddles with the phone, fills out the details, and then presses the button. At that moment, the phone announces it has found her a match, and she notices that a pairing has already been made. Looking at the profile, The girl turns the phone toward Chan and states that her match is a succubus like her, asking what Chan thinks. After glancing at the photos of the man, Chan comments that he seems like a physically active person. Unlike him, the succubus asks if Chan could talk to the guy once, but our protagonist remarks that he looks odd. He wonders why the man has gold decorations all over his body, some of which even look gilded. Additionally, he notices a feminine hand next to the man in one of the photos and questions if the guy cropped it. As he continues analyzing the phone, Chan notices a strange word and asks what it means. The succubus explains that it's an ancient term and the man's name in cheer, which means pure love. The girl remarks that his name sounds incredibly cool and asks Chan if he thinks so too, but when she looks at his face, she notices for some reason that our protagonist seems completely stressed. She asks what's wrong and Chan, at that moment, presses the button to delete the match. Suspicious, Lee asks if the succubus senior, who suggested the app, often plays pranks, and the woman confirms, asking how he knew. She explains that this senior frequently pranks and teases her, making her angry every time because her bully doesn't even listen to her complaints. Finally, she adds that this senior was one of those who dragged her to the club, and she asks why Chan brought it up. He thinks to himself that this was expected. Him realizes that the club situation was probably another prank, so he decides to change the subject and asks what kind of man she likes. Completely confused, she asks why he wants to know, and Chan explains that it'll be hard to find a partner if she doesn't know her ideal type. Lee also points out that it might be easier for her to find a partner if she recognizes her ideal type with clarity. She begins to visualize what she likes and explains that she prefers a guy she can be honest and comfortable with. Someone who listens to all her confessions even if she's going through tough times and shows him her flaws. She wants him to accept her by simply looking into her eyes and listening to everything she has to say. But as she looks at Chan, the succubus seems to feel something specific that deeply touches her heart. Sometime after she leaves, we see our protagonist sweeping the sidewalk. While recalling the moment the girl decided to leave, he wonders if she got home safely or if, for some reason, she felt unwell. Ken questions if he said something wrong, thinking how absurd it is for him to give someone relationship advice when he's never even dated. At that moment, someone calls out to him and he sees it's the same dragon girl, and now wearing a beautiful dress adorned with some patterns. Lee recognizes her and also notices she brought the paper he asked for, and the girl promptly confirms. She states that she came early so she could make gifts for a long time, but while running, she trips. The little child falls flat on her face, and seeing this, Lee becomes completely worried. He helps the girl up and then asks if she's okay or if she hurt herself anywhere. The dragon responds that she's fine, but at that moment a rabbit-like creature arrives, asking if the little girl is okay too. The person mentions they have some ointments for Chan's daughter, and asks if he'd like any, while our protagonist is holding the small girl in his arms. Realizing he's holding the girl like a father and was just called Dad, Chan is left utterly shocked. As the purchases are run up, a girl with wings comments that the half-dragon girl is absolutely adorable. Another customer approaches the counter and remarks that Chan's daughter is truly beautiful and charming. Later, we see an elderly turtle asking if the little dragon followed her father to work, commenting on how cute it was as someone gives a gift to Chan's daughter. Lee remains with an extremely blank expression, unsure of how to respond to the situation. Looking at the half-dragon girl who has received several treats from the customers, he thinks that he is now being mistaken for the father of a child. He notes that if he had married early, he might have a child this age, but it still feels quite strange. Suddenly, the child apologizes and calls out to Chan, who asks what she wants. She says she's bothering him while he's working. Then she apologizes for arriving too early, but Chan, with his usual kindness, replies that it's not a problem and that she doesn't need to worry. He pats the girl's head gently and comments that, on the contrary, it's much easier to work thanks to her. The dragon Brule asks if he's serious and Chan confirms, explaining that many people arrive like zombies on Mondays because of sadness. She asks what that means. The young man replies that it's a terrible disease that only adults get, and when Monday comes they feel down and their bodies ache everywhere. However, after seeing the little girl there, everyone's mood improved and the disease was cured. The girl is impressed to hear this. Chan then asks if she could greet the customers and adds that if she smiles, it would be even better. The girl agrees to try her best. At that moment, a woman with fish gills enters the store with a completely disheartened expression. The woman asks where she can find a hangover cure, and Lee promptly directs her to the right shelf. She seems a bit dazed and can't locate the remedy until she notices the little girl, the half-dragon girl, gives an extremely sweet smile and greets the woman. Instantly, the fish girl feels her heart flutter. Overwhelmed by such cuteness, she comments that she can't believe such a wonderful and adorable child exists. Saying her heart almost exploded, the fish girl tells Chan he must be happy to have such a cute daughter. After completing her purchases, she thanks Lee and then also thanks the half-dragon girl, saying that thanks to her, she feels much better. She bids them goodbye as she exits the convenience store, and Chan tells the customer to come back anytime. In his mind, Lee reflects that the half-dragon girl isn't just lifting the customer's moods, she's also increasing the store's sales. In fact, this is an incredibly impressive feat for a child. Finally, after the exhausting work, Chan decides to continue helping the girl with her gift and asks if she has crayons. The girl promptly says yes. After preparing at the table to continue the girl's project, Chan says they'll start by drawing the base image. He asks what kind of flower field the girl imagines, and she replies that she envisions a vast field under a light blue sky. Our protagonist asks her to fill the paper with that image, and after she finishes, they'll add the paper flowers they made earlier. She agrees. Chan watches the girl draw until another customer enters the store, causing him to turn around. He greets a cat person who just walked in. The cat person asks where the snacks are and Chan directs him to the next aisle. The cat thanks him and walks into the store to find what he's looking for. Lee thinks that everything is going well today and wonders if handling customers is easier because of the half-dragon girl. Suddenly, as he looks at the dragon girl, he notices something odd and asks if something is wrong. Calling out desperately to her friend Lee, the girl says that the cat has something black. Chan is confused, noting that the customer's fur is light brown, and asks what's going on. Chan initially wonders if the girl was referring to the cat's black clothing, but she clarifies, stating that the cat's heart itself was black. The attendant and the half-dragon girl hide behind the counter, watching the cat's movements. Our protagonist asks if the girl is saying the cat is a bad customer, and she nods, explaining that when someone plans to do bad things, their heart turns black. Impressed, Chan asks if she can perceive such things, and she affirms, mentioning that she can see people's hearts change suddenly. Lee comments that one day she'll become someone great with such an ability, while internally debating what to do as the cat doesn't seem to be doing anything suspicious. Looking at the girl, Chan recalls his manager mentioning that dragons can see people's magic, which makes him trust the girl's judgment implicitly. He decides to act and tells the girl to wait while he grabs a mop and begins cleaning the floor of the store for no apparent reason. As he mops, he carefully observes the cat, waiting for any false move. In his mind, Chan challenges the cat to do something bad, steal something, or try to run off with it with a mischievous expression. He vows that the moment the feline acts, he'll deliver justice with his mop. After some time browsing the snacks, the cat selects some dark chocolate balls and asks Chan to ring them up. Surprised that the cat didn't do anything suspicious, Chan's expression momentarily freezes, making the customer uncomfortable. The cat insists he just wants to make a purchase. And seeing this, Chan is startled that the cat didn't attempt to steal anything. Coming back to reality, he promptly begins to process the purchase but internally questions what's going on since the cat hasn't done anything wrong. Chan then wonders if the customer is planning something bad somewhere else. As the cat pulls out money from his wallet, an ominous, dark aura emanates from it. Chan notices this and immediately grabs the customer's hand firmly. He apologizes and asks if the customer could show him his wallet, assuring it will only take a moment. Holding the cat's arm tightly, he insists it'll just take a minute or even 30 seconds. The customer, now visibly annoyed, protests. The feline, pinned against the wall, yells, demanding to know why Chan wants to see his wallet. Staring at the suspicious item, Chan concludes it as he expected, highly suspect. Chan states that the wallet appears similar to the enchanted ID card he encountered earlier, meaning it contains magic and is hiding something. He realizes that if he touches it, as he did with the vampire's fake ID, something might happen. At that moment, the cat pulls away, angrily demanding that Chan stop touching his hand. The feline orders the convenience store clerk to stop messing with him, while Chan desperately thinks of a way to touch the wallet. The customer, irritated, asks what the problem is and Chan tries to explain, claiming the wallet looks cool. He says he's interested in buying one like it and just wants to check the brand. Finally, Chan asks if the cat could show him the wallet, but the customer shouts no. He accuses Lee of being crazy and threatens to call the police if he continues. Chan pleads for him not to do that and insists he just wants to see the wallet. The half-driving girl interrupts the argument, calling out to the cat man with an irresistibly sweet expression. She says she also wants to see his wallet and asks if he could show it to her for just a little while. Her continued pleading overwhelms the cat with cuteness, leaving him utterly flustered. In his dazed state, he accidentally drops the wallet and Chan immediately seizes the opportunity with lightning-fast reflexes. He touches the wallet, thinking to himself that the half-driving girl did an excellent job. The dark energy emanating from the wallet begins to distort the space around it. Inflating rapidly, Chan immediately lets go of it, startled by his reaction. While the wallet continues to swell, he wonders what's happening as the item grows larger and larger. The once calmed Catman is now alarmed, shouting in panic, asking what's going on as the situation escalates. The feline becomes nervous and concerned, questioning why the wallet is suddenly expanding. Chan pulls the dragon girl into his arms behind the counter to protect her, and an explosion occurs, emitting a brilliant light throughout the store. After some time, the brightness fades and the commotion subsides. Various items fall from the exploded wallet, leaving our protagonist bewildered. From the scattered contents, Chan notices that many of the items are products sold in the store. Confused, he wonders why these items burst out of the wallet, and looking at the Catman quickly pieces together the situation, realizing that the cat had tried to secretly steal all those items using the enchanted wallet. Chan sees the trembling thief hiding nearby. He tells the dragon girl to wait for a moment and picks up the mop he had been using earlier, ready to confront the culprit. Slamming the mop down in the frightened cat, Chan, with a furious tone, tells the feline he has something brief to say and demands that he listen. Chan orders the cat to take his things and leave the store immediately, warning him never to return. He adds that if the feline comes back speaking that ridiculous English again, he'll ensure his face gets wiped with a mop. As he delivers the threat, Chan's expression is both terrifying and intimidating. The cat, utterly petrified, bolts out of the store in fear. With the ordeal over, Chan feels a sense of relief but laments that he'll have to clean up the mess again. The dragon girl approaches Chan and asks if he's okay. The boy smiles and assures her that he's fine before asking if she's hurt. With an admirable expression, she replies that she's all right, and Chan expresses his relief, thanking her for helping prevent the robbery. The little girl humbly states that she didn't do much and that it was Chan who caught the thief. At that moment, the door chime rings again and Chan looks up to see a familiar figure entering. It's the manager, surveying the chaos in the store desperately. Chan tries to explain, saying there were some unavoidable circumstances. The manager gives an awkward chuckle and asks if he could explain the circumstances. After detailing the events, the manager asks if all the stolen goods came from the wallet. While finishing cleaning up, Chan confirms but admits he's unsure when it all happened, speculating that the cat must have chosen the items and placed them in the enchanted wallet. The manager agrees, explaining that the wallet was a legally modified magical tool. Analyzing it, she states that the object is imbued with movement magic and storage expansion magic and even bypasses security enchantments. Impressed, she asks how Chan recognized it, leaving the boy struggling to answer. Uncertain of how to explain, Chan simply says it's a bit difficult to articulate. The dragon girl, finishing her task of helping clean, claps her hands happily. The manager thanks her, but the little girl quickly retreats in fear, hiding behind Chan with an expressionless face. Chan watches as the manager tries her best to approach the girl, but the child remains wary. Heartbroken, the manager crouches on the floor, lamenting that she's not a bad person and swearing she means no harm, while Chan tries to console her. Turning to the dragon girl, Chan asks if she needs to head to kindergarten. Realizing she does, the girl responds affirmatively. Chan helps her put on her bag and packs the snacks she received into it, telling her they'll finish the gift for her mother another time. A while later, the girl departs, cheerfully saying she'll see Chan another day. Both Lee and his manager wave goodbye with smiles on their faces. Still curious about the situation, the manager asks if Chan recognized the wallet's nature due to his anti-magic constitution. Lee responds affirmatively, explaining that as soon as he saw the object, everything around it glowed intensely. He notes that it was different from before, as this time the sensation was so strong that he immediately recognized the item. The manager, analyzing the situation, remarks that it seems Chan's anti-magic constitution is gradually improving. He explains that magicians grow stronger as they use more magic, and Chan's constitution might function similarly. Because the boy has experienced so much since arriving in this world, those experiences have stimulated and strengthened his anti-magic abilities. Deciding to discuss this more with him later, she suggests they first handle the attempted theft. Chan questions why, pointing out that it wasn't a successful robbery, merely an attempt. Later, a half-elf police officer introduces herself, stating that she's there to investigate the attempted robbery and asks Chan and the manager to provide more information while Chan explains the situation. The officer diligently notes everything down in her notebook. The manager confirms the accuracy of Chan's explanation and praises him for acting quickly to prevent significant damages. She even asks the officer if he agrees that their employee is incredible, to which he responds positively, complimenting the store for having such a capable worker. It ruled the officer requests to review the security footage, and the manager readily agrees, asking if he needs help accessing it. The officer declines, saying he's done it before and can handle it himself, to which the manager tells him to take his time. After the officer closes the door behind him, the manager turns to Chan with a thoughtful expression. She informs him that her sister, Yun, has sent him some money, leaving him surprised. The manager confirms it's true, explaining that it's a reward for helping purify the magical core. Chan expresses his gratitude and apologizes for not consulting the manager first, but she reassures him it's fine. She mentions that it was just their partner company asking for help, but if Chan ever goes somewhere, it should inform her beforehand. She elaborates that before Chan arrived, she'd been searching for part-time workers for a long time without success. This made her worry it could happen again if Chan left, so she asks him not to forget to notify her if he plans to leave. However, Chan quickly reassures her that he has no intention of leaving. He explains that even if he worked somewhere else in this world, he could only be there because of this convenience store and would have to explain his unique circumstances. Blushing slightly, Lee adds that more than anything, he truly enjoys working there with her. He affirms that he plans to continue working at the so she doesn't need to worry, causing the manager to smile warmly, patting his back. The manager, convinced, remarks that she's indeed better than other store owners and looks forward to continuing to work with Chan. Teasing him slightly, she comments that she should devise a proper plan for his constitution. Confused, Chan asks what she means, but at that moment, Irol emerges from the camera room. The manager turns and asks if he's finished reviewing the footage, and the officer firmly replies that he has. She notes that they now have the suspect's description and the tool used in the crime, so the investigation should proceed quickly. The manager expresses relief. She asks the officer to handle the matter carefully, and he agrees before turning his attention to Chan. Irol states that based on the incident details and the security footage, it's clear the wallet had several magical spells embedded in it. However, it seems all the spells were deactivated and he noticed Chan touching the wallet. He asks if Chan has any idea about this. Finally, he orders Chan to respond honestly if he has any knowledge of what happened, leaving our protagonist feeling nervous and unsure of what to say. Stressed by the situation, Chan starts to explain that when the thief took out the wallet, but at that moment, the manager interrupts, reminding him not to lie. Closing his eyes, visibly flustered, Chan says he doesn't know what to do. He explains that he simply touched the wallet with his hand, and it exploded on its own. Yurilin questions if Lee was saying that the wallet self-destructed. The young man responds that it probably did, as he wasn't sure, and all he did was touch the suspicious wallet, and suddenly, it exploded. The manager intervenes and says the wallet might have been designed to deactivate all spells when touched by a third party, and such magical tools were common in the past. The policewoman asks if the manager was a mage, and she promptly responds that she was, and that she would have to analyze it, but based on her guess, that seemed to be the case. Satisfied, the elf responds that he understood, and immediately after, he thanks them for cooperating with the investigation. Then she asks if the two had any questions, and Chan promptly responds that they didn't, but his boss starts yelling that she had something to ask. She inquires if the officer usually sleeps well, and the young man, with a face that suggests he's lying, says yes. Uriel states that, in fact, he ensures to sleep 30 minutes a day, and Chan, hearing this, is shocked, while the manager adds that it's dangerous to drive if he sleeps so little. The woman says she'll give the elf a potion the next time he comes to the store so he can drink it and have a good night's sleep, and the young man thanks her for the offer. However, he replies that it would violate the anti-bribery law, but the girl reveals that her potion costs less than 30,000 won, and he could buy it. The girl explains that she was offering it because she was genuinely concerned about the officer, so he should please accept it comfortably. The policewoman, slightly annoyed, looks at our protagonist, who immediately notices. Chan simply says he has tested that potion before, and it really works. He explains that the potion tastes like strawberries and is easy to drink, and with it Uriel falls deeply asleep, so he should try it. The elf, feeling pressured and with no escape, sighs and agrees. Right after, he says he'll visit again when the investigation results are revealed. Some time passes, and the police car leaves, and our protagonist wonders what would have happened if he had told the truth. His manager replies that the elf probably would have told Chan to become a police officer since there are so few anti-magic users that they're welcomed everywhere. However, Chan replies that he doesn't think Uriel would have suggested that because, based on how she mentioned the bribery law, she seemed like a very honest elf. The manager says he's partly right, but the elf was probably trying not to get into any trouble since she's an officer but only sleeps 30 minutes a day. In her opinion, the elf must be going through a lot at work, and our protagonist thinks it's probably due to her race. Looking at the street, he sees an elf walking while thinking he understands why people don't like elves because of past events. But it wasn't right to persecute those who genuinely reflect on their mistakes and try to help other races. The elf walking down the street bumps into a half-dog, and the animal apologizes, but the elf starts to get furious, saying an apology doesn't fix everything. He asks if the elf and Chan concludes that maybe they're discriminated against because of their personalities. At that moment, while looking at his phone, the manager informs Chan that Yuna said she would see the boy that night, and Chan asks why. The manager reveals that, in fact, her sister and she talked about the boy's constitution yesterday, and Yuna said she got a good solution but it was making her uneasy. So, she asks if Chan would like to hear what Yuna has to say first. After some time, we see the blue-haired girl stating that Lee should obtain an anti-magic license. She explains that the boy would be easily accepted and moreover it would be very useful for him in many ways, and Chan asks what an anti-magic license is in connection with Lee. The manager explains that a magic license is one of the national certifications in that world, and is like a specialist license to deal with magical matters. However, Lee asks if that would be possible since he was a person from another world who had no identification there, but the manager says she will take care of it. Lee asks how she would achieve such a feat, and the girl seems excited. She simply says she'll prepare everything well, so our protagonist shouldn't worry and should relax, and he agrees. Chan questions whether Yuna really didn't know he was from another world, and the manager confirms that she didn't, as nothing good would come from others knowing that. We see the blue-haired girl restlessly sitting in a chair, and the manager explains that she told Yuna that Chan was a boy from a remote island. Lee, though slightly uncomfortable with this, simply says he will talk to Yuna and hangs up the call. He approaches the girl, and the blue-haired girl asks if her sister explained everything to Lee, and he responds affirmatively. The girl then says they are ready to begin and asks if she can now truly talk with Chan. She informs our protagonist that he cannot hide his anti-magic constitution. This is because that ability isn't particularly unique, and is only special because it presents an exceptionally strong anti-magic trait. Yuna says the young man could purify many things and deactivate various magical tools, and the fact that his constitution is growing stronger is something worth studying. The young woman also says that she and her sister have seen many anti-magic specialists while working, but none of them could compare to Lee, and hearing this, he becomes shy. She says that Chan should think of this positively, and explains that if others discovered his anti-magic ability, he would be bombarded with requests for help. He asks if this could be resolved by obtaining a license, and Yuna replies that it could, as her sister mentioned that he is just a part-time worker. In other words, it would be difficult for her to refuse other people's requests, and also hard to handle things properly. However, if he got the license and a contract, Chan would become part of a company, and the manager could then have an excuse to prevent the young man from being bothered. In summary, she was saying that Chan was in a position where he couldn't take on a second job, and he responds that this is a smart idea. Then Yuna adds that even so, her sister said it was still a problem, even though the exam is something any race in that world can take. In other words, there was no issue. However, our protagonist responds in his mind that this is precisely the problem. He tells himself that he is just a visitor in this world, and while working there, he has never taken more than 30 steps outside the convenience store. In other words, to take the exam, he would have to formally enter that world, have you take a bus, find the exam center and sit there to take the exam. He thinks that even if somehow he passes the exam, he might continue getting involved with others afterward. Chan mentions that he doesn't know if he truly wants to take the exam, and suddenly Yuna breaks the ice by stating that her sister is very worried about him. The girl states that her sister has been talking about him constantly since he arrived, and especially today, she's been more concerned than usual. Moreover, she must have had many concerns when suggesting the license to him, and in fact, Yuna had never seen her own sister like that. She then asks if Chan would dare to try taking the exam. Suddenly, the manager arrives at the store with fried chicken, and Yuna becomes quite excited. As they could celebrate their thanks to her sister, the blue-haired girl asks if the manager will be fine if she doesn't sleep that night, and the manager replies that they shouldn't worry about sleep on a day like that. Before she continues talking, our protagonist immediately declares that he will take the license exam. He comments that he even deals with troublesome customers there, so the exam would be nothing to him. Because of this, the girl shouldn't worry, and she gives a small smile upon hearing this. Suddenly, the young woman begins opening her backpack and reveals something. Our protagonist and Yuna, upon seeing what was inside that object, are quite shocked. The manager explains that all those items are talismans to help pass the exam, and she had thought about making them herself, but ended up buying the pieces because she didn't have time. Yuna, analyzing them, says they all seem quite expensive, but the manager informs Chan that he is on leave from now on. In other words, he shouldn't work until the exam is over, and for that reason they would prepare together. The boy asks if that's really okay, and she says yes. As the most special child in the world is going to take the exam, the woman states that she will fully support the boy as a manager, so they should do their best together. Suddenly, Yuna raises her finger and reluctantly says she doesn't think the boy can prepare for the exam. This is because the exam is actually tomorrow at 9 in the morning. She then asks if the two still really want to participate, and upon hearing this, they look completely disappointed. Some time later, we see the sun rising over a beautiful city after teleporting with the convenience store. Our protagonist is looking through the glass door and, impressed, asks if that is the academic district. The manager confirms and says she is planning to open a new store there soon. He comments that the shape of the buildings there looks like a park, but the manager responds that it's the opposite, as the largest castle there was built long ago by various races. And that castle is the only one that has retained its original form after the war and now symbolizes peace, having been transformed into a top-tier educational institute. Confused, he asks where the exam location is, and the manager points it out. Chan thanks his manager as the girl teleported them close to the exam center. The young woman simply replies that she had to since it's his first time. She asks how the young man is feeling, and Chan says he feels a little nervous, like he's a student again. The manager says she knows that feeling and asks him to call her after the exam, as she will pick him up, and he agrees. After walking just a few steps outside the convenience store, the manager calls out to Chan, who turns around excited and enthusiastic about the situation. She simply asks our protagonist not to stress and then wishes him good luck. The young man gives a small smile and waves, saying he'll be back soon. Some time later, the manager finishes attending to a customer and then says goodbye to him. The girl seems a bit distracted and suddenly notices something odd. She looks at her phone and sees a notification from her sister asking if Chan had arrived safely at the exam room. Seeing this, the girl realizes his exam is about to start. A flashback of our protagonist comes to the girl's mind, and she wonders if Chan will be okay, as she told him to stay calm. Trying to reassure herself, she says that surely nothing will happen in the exam room. At that moment, our protagonist approaches an ogre and asks the young man if he can take photos of his exam papers with his phone. The boy explains that he left in a hurry and didn't bring anything to study, and then asks again for permission. The nerd, feeling confident and flattered by Chan's attitude, simply adjusts his glasses. He then tells Chan to go ahead since it's not like his test will wear out, and the boy takes the photo and thanks him. Lee heads to his chair to sit down while thinking that he prepared at least somewhat. Looking back, he notices there are indeed many candidates there. The young man remarks that he thought there wouldn't be many people because this is a difficult exam, but he was wrong as there seemed to be a wide variety of different species. He wonders if he's the only human there, and looking at the photos he took, young man decides to analyze the previous tests using a translation app. Finally, he manages to translate everything and starts reading what was written. Chan sees a question asking what measures should be taken to resolve the cause of imbalance when a ranked arachnid monster is struck. However, this leaves our protagonist extremely confused as he doesn't even know what species that is. He then decides to move to the next question and sees one about high voltage wires, Wondering if he should use rubber gloves and perform CPR. Seeing that he also couldn't solve this one, he moves to the next, which asks what should be done to disarm a magic bomb. Lee answers that he should run and scream, and finally he gives himself one last attempt to solve at least one question, but upon analyzing the last one, he simply stays silent. In his head, completely disheartened, the young man already tells his manager he's going to fail the exam. Looking at his fellow exam candidates around him, he wonders how to solve this and questions if anti-magic specialists work in so many fields. Chan acknowledges why Yuna pursued this certification, as it truly opens up many possibilities. Our protagonist thinks that, at this rate, not only will he fail his first time taking the exam, but he'll also have to retake it several times. Suddenly, a person with short red hair enters the room with an imposing presence. This person announces that the exam will begin in 5 minutes and then asks everyone to please turn off their electronic devices and place them in their bags. The instructor introduces himself as Proctor Deckard and states that he will go over the exam instructions. He explains that the exam will begin shortly and last for 60 minutes. It consists of 1 auditory question and 79 multiple-choice questions with a total score of 200 points. Additionally, he emphasizes that if any cheating is detected during the exam, the person will be expelled and face disadvantages not only for this exam, but also for future ones. He asks everyone to keep this in mind and adds that they can write the answers to the auditory question on the exam sheet. Finally, he asks anyone with questions about the exam to raise their hands silently. Snapping his fingers, the proctor declares that they will now begin the dangerous exam. The first part will be the listening test, and at that moment he plays a song while Chan picks up his exam sheet, but it leaves him confused. He begins to notice that the song is a children's tune, and soon the speaker starts singing about the orc family living in the same house. It mentions Papa Orc, Mama Orc, and Baby Orc. Papa Orc has big muscles, Mama Orc is also quite strong, but Baby Orc is very weak. However, with the family united, they all become strong, making them a happy and strong orc family. Deckard asks everyone to write the name of this children's song on their answer sheets. While everyone seems quite nervous, Chan is confused in his head. He wonders if this is really the listening test and supposes it might be an easy question to ensure no one scores 0. He reasons that since the previous exam questions were so difficult, naturally the real exam questions would be even harder, and this feels strange. However, when he looks at his test, he notices a question asking what 1 + 1 is. The young man continues analyzing the questions and sees that everything is extremely easy, asserting that this can't be real. Lee raises his hand immediately to get Deckard's attention to ask a question. The red-haired man walks over to our protagonist and asks what's wrong, to which the young man replies that the questions seem a bit odd. He questions whether the questions are correct, since, no matter how much he looks, none of it seems right. The proctor simply responds that there is nothing wrong with the questions in a cold tone. He adds that if there is a problem, it might be with Chan. After saying this, as he walks away, he tells Lee to focus on the exam. Completely confused, our protagonist wonders what's going on with that proctor and why he's bothering him. The young man questions if these ridiculous questions are truly normal and feels quite puzzled. Looking at Deckard's back, our protagonist seems to grow increasingly frustrated. After the exam ends, Chan leaves the location and steps onto the street. As he calls his manager, he thinks about how he was only taking the exam for 15 minutes before it ended, and his manager asks if he finished answering all the questions. Lee remarks that the certification exam level in that world is like that of elementary school, but the manager, irritated, says that their world's intellectual level is actually quite high. The manager asks if the test was really that easy, and our protagonist replies that it was. He adds that he even asked the proctor about it but was treated as if he was the problem. Our protagonist informs her that he answered all the questions and wonders if the other certification exams are just as easy. However, a silence falls on the call, and nothing can be heard. Suddenly, on the other end of the line, the manager bursts into laughter. Lee asks what's going on, and the girl apologizes while saying it seems the examiners were quite clever this time. She asks if Lee noticed anything strange on the test like last time, and the young man says no. The girl explains that they likely cast spells over the entire exam room. She states that it seems they used sensory distortion and cognitive decline spells, and asks how the other candidates reacted to the test. Chan, recalling the moment he saw the concerned candidates, says that the others seem to find the test difficult. The girl assumes that completely different questions must have appeared for the other candidates, as questions about anti-magic are very difficult to solve. In other words, if the candidate solves these extremely complicated false questions and manages to achieve a passing score, they pass, but barely. However, if they notice the magic surrounding the test and manage to dispel it, solving the exam questions becomes extremely easy. In short, The examiners have prepared a rather decent written test. And that was entertaining. However, Chan said that it is no different from a practical test, and he is certain that all the candidates who took this exam will complain, but the girl says they probably prepared 2 types of written questions, meaning they will let you pass if you get passing grade on either test. She claims that she imagines the examiner's thought process was something like, let's give extra points or prioritize the practical test for candidates who notice the magic, or let's adjust the difficulty of the practical test according to the candidate's level. Since it is common to prepare for written practical tests, a candidate with insufficient practical skills taking a test beyond their level is dangerous. After all, you can't predict what might happen with magic, and upon hearing this, Chan becomes thoughtful. She concludes that because of this, they must be trying to proceed cautiously. And by the way, she asks Chan when she should go pick up the boy. Our protagonist replies that she can come now, and the girl states that she will go immediately. But then she attends to a customer who has just entered the store. The young woman says she will send a text message when the customer in the store leaves and asks him to wait. But he responds that he is not in a hurry. Suddenly, the 2 children near Chan start talking, and one of them says they heard that a classmate and another student fought yesterday. The young bunny girl claims that the otter from another class started the fight, and her friend asks if there was a fight. However, the girl replies that they just had a contest. The other bunny asks what kind of contest it was, and upon hearing this, Chan comments that their conversation topic was similar to his real world. However, at that moment, the little girl responds that their contest was about who was more attractive, and at that moment, Chan realizes he was mistaken and it was not common. The bunny explains that the otter started with a cute act first to grab everyone's attention, then the smaller panda from the other class countered with a charm attack. Moreover, they continued for a long time even when the lunch break was ending. They didn't stop at this point. The other bunny, listening to the story, immediately asks what won. However, the girl replies that there was no conclusion as a dragon from another class intervened and ended like that, and the young boy responds that it was boring. The brown-furred boy says that thinking about it, there is a dragon in his class too. And the bunny girl asks what kind of child she is since she sometimes encountered this dragon. And the bunny boy responds that she was quite strange, as when they are playing, the girl tries to talk to them, and every time everyone freezes and the atmosphere becomes very awkward. And finally, the boy concludes that she is different from other dragons. At this moment, the white bunny girl notices something and warns her friend, and when they look to the side, they see Chan extremely close, just listening to the conversation. One of the bunnies is startled and immediately asks what Chan is doing and why he is listening to their conversation. He tries to explain, but at that moment, his manager sends a notification saying she is on her way. Our protagonist apologizes and then immediately tells the children to be careful on their way to school and leaves, thinking he was almost reported. But as he walks away, the young man thinks that the dragon story still bothers him. He recalls the words of one of the bunnies, and in his mind, Chan wonders if the dragon they were referring to is the child who always visits his store. Lee mentions that it couldn't be true. And he tells himself there is no way such a coincidence would happen until, at that moment, he finally encounters his manager, who was calling for him. A while later, night finally falls over that beautiful world as he walks through the streets. The young man says he wanted to know if his manager was okay since she had been awake for 2 nights in a row. In his mind, he complains as he really should have worked in the morning since he couldn't work during his regular shift because of the test, but his boss didn't allow. Chan enters the store and comments that his manager is always so strict in moments like this, which is a bit stressful. After entering, some confetti flies toward him and his boss congratulates him. Our protagonist asks why this is happening and the girl just giggles. She turns the screen of her smartphone toward him and asks the young man to take a look. Chan realizes it's the exam results sheet, and the manager comments that he passed with a perfect score and, moreover, placed first in the test. Excited, the young man says he thought he had failed everything because the questions were strange, and the girl replies that she was very surprised by such an excellent result. Lee states that the next practical test schedule is very tight, and he realizes that he will also have to prepare for that practical test as she cracks her fingers. The girl responds that he can start now and immediately summons a magic circle in her hand with a small ball inside a barrier. She asks if the boy can touch it and he promptly agrees. However, as he moves his hand toward the circle, the ball moves in various directions to escape and then breaks the barrier holding it. Leaving Chan confused, the ball that was inside the circle starts bouncing all over the store, hitting various places. Lee asks why on earth is happening, but his manager orders him to catch it immediately. The girl yells that Lee can see the ball with his eyes and then catch it, and Chan agrees. He begins to focus on observing the trajectory of the item until he sees the perfect moment. Chan runs toward the ball, capturing it perfectly. After capturing it, the ball changes color and Chan asks what it is, and the girl responds that this is the ball's original form because she cast several spells on the ball to make it behave that way. The girl steps closer to Chan while stating that she will explain what he needs to practice. The young woman tells her employee that, as expected, he can also dispel barriers. She says she's glad she prepared other containers just in case, and Chan asks what exactly that bouncing ball is. The girl explains that it's an item to help Lee practice for his practical test, since that bouncing ball has 3 types of magic cast on it. Among those 3 types of magic, he only needs to dispel the automatic activity magic and the sound magic. Chan asks if this has anything to do with his practical test. The girl responds that it does, as an anti-magic specialist dispels magic, but Lee cannot simply dispel all magic indiscriminately. She explains that the machines in that world have some degree of magic, for example subways and trains. They use electricity and oil as basic fuel, but also have magical engines installed to control speed and prevent overheating. In other words, if you were to dispel all the magical devices installed in those subways and trains, those 3 subways couldn't operate that day, and it would take a lot of time and money to reconfigure their magic, and naturally they would charge the person responsible for the damages. Chan then asks if he won't be able to take the practical test since he has been dispelling all sorts of spells so far, but the girl says no. She explains that, as she mentioned before, Chan can control his constitution with his will. And if that weren't the case and his constitution dispelled all magic unconditionally, he wouldn't have been able to successfully purify the dragon scales. In other words, Chan just needs to practice and control his constitution with his will and dispel only 1 spell at a time, and he feels compelled to try. Lee responds that he will do his best, and the manager says that's great since she made many of those elastic balls and placed them in a large container. She states that the balls are stored in the drawer under the cigarette display, so the young man should practice whenever he can, seeing everything his manager has done. He asks if she prepared all this today. The girl replies yes, as she had already said she would fully support our protagonist. She even apologizes as if it were about using magic. She could help him in another way, but this is all she can do for now. Then she asks Chan to cheer up as he can really do this during his shift. Our protagonist continues practicing with the balls to dispel only the necessary magic. Chan prepares for the right moment, carefully observing the bouncing balls with his sharp eyes. All of them start bouncing immediately, and he just watches them attentively. He sees a perfect opportunity and swiftly grabs one of the balls with his hand. However, once again it turns completely black and he realizes he has failed yet again. Lee adds the darkened ball to a box filled with several others, commenting that this was already his 50th attempt. Frustrated, he thinks that dispelling only the automatic activity magic and the sound magic isn't working. Looking at the jar, he notices there are only 3 bouncing balls left, meaning he doesn't have many more chances. Chan recalls his manager's advice that his will controls his constitution, so he wonders if that means his will needs to be extremely strong. He tells himself there must be a right way, and at that moment, someone wearing well-fitted pants enters the store with his back turned. Unable to see who it is, Chan welcomes the newcomer, and the unknown customer asks him to pay attention for a moment. It's the wolf from the other day, who remarks that it's been a long time since he last saw Chan, and the boy agrees. The wolf states he didn't expect Chan to remember him, and the boy asks how he could forget a customer who left such a strong impression. As he scans the man's purchases, he asks if the wolf has been working elsewhere, and the wolf replies yes, saying his colleagues recommended he try different places. Thanks to that, he broadened his horizons, but he adds that transportation was inconvenient, so he couldn't visit often afterward. The man asks how Chan has been, and Chan responds that the young man, recalling past events, comments that he has a long story to tell. Suddenly, a pale white hand quickly pushes open the convenience store door. A girl of completely albino skin and white hair enters, panting heavily, crying with a frightened voice. She apologizes and prepares to say something. She asks where the tissues are, and Chan, completely startled, just points to a corner. The pale creature promptly thanks him and walks toward the spot he indicated. Chan asks the wolf if that's a ghost customer, but the man replies that he couldn't analyze closely enough to be sure. However, he guesses that the creature might be a snow woman, and Lee wonders if snow women usually cry like that. The girl, wiping her eyes with tissues, cries so intensely that she freezes much of the area, frightening our protagonist. Concerned, Chan asks if the surroundings are really freezing, and the wolf explains that snow women typically emit cold air. The intensity of the cold can increase with their emotions, meaning this woman likely has a long story to share, and he suggests they calm her down first. Chan asks what he should say, and the wolf offers to help if Chan doesn't mind. Our protagonist replies no, thanking the wolf for his offer, but saying he can't involve a customer in his problems. The wolf insists, curious about her story. Moreover, he adds that talking to multiple people might resolve things faster, and Chan admits to himself that might be true since the wolf is more experienced. Looking at the snow girl freezing everything around her while crying, the boy admits the wolf likely communicates better than he does. Immediately, Chan approaches her and politely calls for her attention. Embarrassed, the clerk says he understands she's going through a difficult time, but if the cold continues, it will affect his business. He asks her to please not do this there. However, looking into her eyes, he sees she's still crying, deeply saddened by something. She apologizes but asks if she can stay just a little longer, and Chan agrees but only for 3 minutes. Understanding the situation, the girl promises to leave in 3 minutes, but at that moment, the wolf begins pulling something from his coat with a handkerchief in hand. He kneels to her level and, addressing her respectfully, asks if he may inquire about the problem she's facing with a gentle tone. He remarks that no matter how difficult it may be, sharing one's troubles with someone can lighten the burden, and he asks if she could share her story. The girl feels persuaded and explains that she had a boyfriend who cheated on her with a coworker. Hearing this, Lee is utterly shocked. Crying, the girl explains that her boyfriend said he had to work overtime, so she went to watch a movie alone, only to see him leaving the theater with another woman. It turned out the guy was cheating on her with his coworker, and upon hearing this, Chan comments that it sounds like something out of a drama. The wolf asks what happened afterward, and she explains that they argued for a long time, pulling each other's hair, but it hurt so much that she was the first to run away. The girl says her husband's mistress was really mean, threatening her and claiming that he was her man and she would destroy her. Hearing this, Chan is shocked sadly. The senile woman says it's ridiculous and infuriating that the mistress stole her man, and confused, she wonders why the mistress was so confident. On top of that, that idiot was always picking unnecessary fights with her and now even stole her man, causing her to emit cold air. Seeing this, the wolf says he wouldn't dare claim to fully understand her feelings. However, he suggests that the snow woman probably still loves her ex-boyfriend and asks if she would consider having an honest conversation with him, and the girl responds no, saying she shouldn't have to deal with people who wronged her, and the wolf acknowledges that but points out she seems to have unresolved feelings. He states that regret isn't something you should bury in your heart, because if left unresolved, it will linger as a burden and haunt her. Finally, he concludes that even though it's painful and difficult now, he suggests she resolve those feelings even just a little. That way, she can spend her future days smiling. And upon hearing this, the young woman admits he's right. She stands up, determined to take action, saying that if she avoids it now, she'll regret it later, and she doesn't want to waste her precious time like that. Almost at the door, the girl says she knows they'll fight again and pull each other's hair, but this time she won't run away and will have a proper conversation. To resolve everything before leaving, she thanks the wolf for comforting her, and he replies it's no problem as he didn't do much at that moment. However, a red car pulls up at high speed in front of the store. Chan asks if he should call the police just in case, but the snow woman says no, it's fine. The person in the red car asks the white-haired woman if she ran to seek help from another race or if she's looking for another target to flirt with. We see that the speaker is a girl with red hair. Mockingly, the red-haired girl claims that the white-haired girl is consistent in showing her pathetic side, but white-haired woman demands to know how her rival dares to show up so shamelessly in front of her and questions if she has any sense of conscience. However, the fiery woman says she didn't come to hear such talk, as love is something you must win for yourself. Finally, the fire woman advises the white-haired girl to give up while she's being furious at the situation. The snow woman begins freezing everything around her. While our protagonist wonders what's happening, he refuses to believe these two girls are really going to fight right here, but the white-haired girl begins summoning ice crystals. Chan decides to try resolving this with words and politely asks the red-haired girl to move her car, explaining she can't park there. He then asks if she could park somewhere else. But something unexpected happens. The red-haired girl, visibly irritated, summons a fireball in her hand and warns Chan to stay out of it unless he wants to end up in the hospital. Chan tries again, urging her to listen and leave, but the white-haired girl, now surrounded by ice crystals, declares she'll never lose her boyfriend to a lunatic like that, even if it kills her. As she unleashes her powers, she asserts that she won't let the red-haired girl have her boyfriend. However, the wolf steps in, saying that if she continues like this, she'll only regret it later. He then swiftly strikes her neck. The girl, who had been furious moments ago, collapses unconscious, unable to react. The red-haired girl, upon seeing this scene, looks completely confused and asks who the werewolf is. She then questions where he came from so suddenly, and as he leans the other girl against the wall, he simply stares at the red-haired girl. The girl calls out to Chan, asking if that old man is his friend, and then questions if he plans to keep interfering in other people's business. She declares that both of them need to feel the burn of fire, but at that moment, the wolf also immobilizes her, causing her to pass out. After knocking her unconscious, he apologizes in case he offended her. The man explains that he was observing the two to see if their problems would be resolved, but since they were trying to hurt each other, he had no choice. He adds that he had to interfere, and after delivering this statement, gently asks Chan if he's okay. Lier replies that he's fine, but questions whether the needed to be capable of doing such things just to be a driver. The wolf responds, of course, saying that you need to react as soon as you get a call, and quick movements are essential. He adds that otherwise it's hard to survive, and in his mind, Lier wonders if he's really just a driver. However, looking up, the wolf notices large chunks of ice and remarks that it's a problem, while Chan asks if they won't melt if left there. The man explains that magically created objects don't disappear so easily, and magical ice is fused with magic, making it hard to melt and incredibly durable. He also notes that all magical objects have similar properties, so when dealing with such items, one should call an anti-magic specialist. Seeing this, Chan assumes that it probably means he can get rid of it himself. In his mind, he comments that since all he needs to do is get rid of it, it should be easier than the test with the bouncing walls. Therefore, it should be fine even if he doesn't control his will while using his ability. And with that, he touches one of the ice crystals. Chan immediately notices it's working as the ice begins to melt, and the wolf remarks that it's fascinating. The man asks if Chan is skilled in anti-magic, and the boy shyly responds just a little. Lee asks if the man can tell if someone is an anti-magic user just by looking, and the wolf replies yes, explaining that he visits the hospital around the second week of every month. He became familiar with anti-magic because he met a specialist there whom he visits frequently, leaving Lee surprised to learn there's someone like that at the hospital. Our protagonist then says that if it's okay, he'd like to know if the wolf could share about his visits to the hospital. The man asks why, and Lee explains that the problem is he's studying to get certified in anti-magic and pass the written test, but he's struggling with the practical portion, and thinks hearing the man's story might help him find a clue, to which the wolf responds that it's surprising. The wolf says that from what he saw earlier, the boy seemed so skilled he didn't realize the young man was still learning, and Chan replies that he's just an amateur. Chan then asks if, in any case, he could ask the man for help with this. However, the wolf says in that case, he'll show him something and begins to roll up his sleeve. He explains it's faster to show and then points his wrist toward Chan. Our protagonist asks what it is as he sees a symbol of a chain encircling a magical circle imprinted on the wolf's wrist. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.